Good afternoon, Mr. Halley. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair.
It's been a long time. I haven't seen you
It has been.
stand there in a long time.
It has been, Mr. Chair.
Yes, yes. Good afternoon, Mr. Mabuyakhulu.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you for availing yourself for purposes of the commission. Yes, Mr. Halley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, the proceedings today arise from a directive that is dated 16 April 2021 that was sent to Mr. Mabuyakhulu, calling upon him to come and testify to deal with matters as to a conflict between himself and two witnesses who have implicated him. I'll take you to that in a short while. If I can, in the meantime, as a matter of housekeeping, just ask you to consider the bundle LEA 27, which is before you, Mr. Chair. That bundle will largely be the bundle that is required for today's purposes. If I could give some background to how this matter has come before the Commission, Mr. Chair, you'll recall that two witnesses, a certain Mr. Trevor White of PricewaterhouseCoopers, testified sometime in January of 2020, and a certain Mr. Colonel Pitt Deploy also testified sometime in February of 2020. Now, they testified about a number of matters, some of which is of importance for today's purposes, but specifically, they testified about a certain Mr. Gaston Savoy, who was the director and the owner of a number of companies which were referred to as the Intaka group of companies. Amongst the various transactions that those companies were responsible for were the sales of certain units to the KwaZulu-Natal provincial government via its Department of Local Government and Local Government and Traditional Affairs. Arising out of those transactions, there was Mr. Savoy was required to pay over a certain amount of money as a donation. The indication that was given to him was that it would be a donation of 1.053 million rand that would be paid over to the ANC. Now, what today's proceedings are concerned with is the question of the 1.053 million rand, and which was supposed to, from the evidence that had been levied by Mr. Trevor White, what it showed was that the amount had been paid into the firm of attorneys, Koboni and Shezi attorneys, and from that it had been disbursed to various creditors of a certain Mr. Sipho Shabalala. Mr. Mabuyakhulu's involvement in this matter relates to the fact that he provided an affidavit at some stage and provided support for the view that Mr. Shabalala had in fact paid over that amount of money, or paid over an amount of money of 1 million rand to the ANC. So on the 16th of April of 2021, a directive was sent to him that appears at RR7, page 130. This is part of the bundle LEA 27, in which he was called upon to come and testify at paragraph 1, and in the quotation 1, before Mr. Mabuyakhulu's application for leave to cross-examine Mr. White and Colonel Deploy can be decided, it is necessary for Mr. Mabuyakhulu to testify and subject himself to questioning by a member of the Commission's legal team, whereafter an assessment will be made on exactly what allegations of fact remain in dispute between Mr. White and Colonel Deploy on the one hand, and Mr. Mabuyakhulu on the other. And then he's instructed, Mr. Mabuyakhulu is hereby directed to appear before the Commission, and it's given today's date, and on the following page is told to give evidence and be questioned with regard to the matter of 1 million rand donation dealt with in his affidavit delivered to the Commission. And it's in that context that Mr. Mabuyakhulu has been called to come and testify today.
Yes, okay, no, that's fine.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I think I missed being able to state my representation. AJ Dixon, ASC from Pietermaritzburg. I'm instructed by PKX attorneys and I'm representing the witness, Michael Mabuyakhulu.
Well, I wasn't not aware that there was a legal representative. Were you aware, Mr. Halley?
I was aware, Mr. Chairperson. I should have drawn that to your attention.
Yes,
prior
to my
my
attention.
sincere apologies.
Yes, okay, now at least he does appear there. Good afternoon, Mr. Dixon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Nice to see you.
Yes, nice to see you too. Okay, so you have just placed on record that you represent Mr. Mabuyakhulu.
That's correct.
Yes, okay, all right. Mr. Halley, are you done?
I'm done with the
Done in terms
introduction,
of
Mr.
outlining?
In
what-
terms of outlining how the matter comes before the Commission.
Yes,
If Mr. Mabuyakhulu can be sworn in so that I can take him through the evidence relevant
Yes.
to the issues that have been raised.
okay. Mr. Dixon, at this stage, there is nothing you wish to say. Otherwise, if there is nothing, we would have Mr. Mabuyakhulu sworn in.
Mr. Chair, I wonder if I could ask for an indulgence.
Yes.
Mr. Mabuyakhulu, once he's sworn in, would like to make an opening statement.
Yeah.
It may be on the lengthy side for an opening statement, but that will be his evidence, as it were, and all his contentions that he wishes to make. And if he's permitted to do that, then Mr. Halley can ask questions afterwards, if that's in order.
As I understand it, although you refer to it as an opening statement, what you actually mean is he would like to tell his side of the story.
That's
Is that
correct, Mr. Chair.
Yes, before he's questioned.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, no, that's all right. Let's have him sworn in first, and then I'll hear what Mr. Halley, whether Mr. Halley has anything to say about that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Mr. Mabuyakhulu, the registrar will administer an oath or affirmation to you at this stage. Maybe if you can unmute yourself, and then you will appear, your picture will appear.
Okay.
Sorry.
Oh, I understand, Mr. Mabuyakhulu, you should talk, and when you talk, start talking, then your picture will appear.
I'm here, Mr. Chairman. I'm waiting to take
okay.
an issue.
All right, okay.
Please state your full names for the record.
My full name is Michael Mabuyakhulu.
Do you have any objection to making the prescribed affirmation?
I have no objection.
Sorry, what did you just repeat?
Do you have any objection to making the prescribed affirmation?
Oh, okay.
I have no objection, Mr. Chairman.
Do you affirm that the evidence you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, I truly affirm.
I truly affirm.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Mr.
Chair.
Halley, do you have anything to say about the request?
Mr. Chair, I've got no difficulty per se, as long as Mr. Mabuyakhulu, of course, understands that the purpose of today's proceedings is very limited. It's not on the question of his overall testimony relating to all the matters that have been raised by Mr. White and Colonel Deploy. It relates to a very specific and a very narrow issue. But subject to that, I've got no difficulty with it.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Mr. Mabuyakhulu, what's your estimate of how much time you need in order to just tell your story, your side of the story?
I only need up to 15 minutes, not more than
About 15 minutes.
Mr. Chairman.
15 minutes.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
No, that's fine.
Yes, sir.
I give you this opportunity now. You can go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, and the Commission as a whole. Please allow me, Mr. Chairman, to set out the context of the issues that have resulted in my appearance before this Judicial Commission, whose primary task is to investigate the existence of state capture, corruption, fraud in the public sector, including organs of state. The first matter, Mr. Chairman, that I wish to place on record is the matter that I have raised in my supplementary affidavit in paragraph 1 to 5. I place before you, Mr. Chairman, a concern of significant importance. On the 9th of January 2020, the Commission informed me that Messrs. Trevor Sean White and Petros Johan Duploy would mention my name in their evidence. And after being served with their respective affidavits that were submitted to this Commission, I made an application to the Commission in terms of Rule 3.3.6.3 to cross-examine the two witnesses on the allegations they had made about me. Instead of being afforded an opportunity to cross-examine these witnesses, based on their testimonies to this Commission, I've been advised that the Chairman has ruled that before my application is decided, I must first give evidence and submit myself to questioning. I confirm, Mr. Chairman, that I'm appearing before this Commission in order to honor that directive as I hereby do. The Chairman, I wish to make it clear that I welcome the opportunity to give evidence before this Commission. I, however, Mr. Chairman, wish to place on record that I would have expected the Commission to firstly allow me the opportunity to cross-examine the said two witnesses on aspects of their evidence that I regard not to be based on facts, logic, and rationality. Yet I'm now expected to negate the evidence against me before the version of their evidence is even tested by this Commission. The major concern I have here is that I'm now giving evidence in denial of unfounded opinions or inferences before showing how fallible those unfounded opinions or inferences are. I therefore place this concern on record at the outset. I also wish to point out, Mr. Chairman, that I've been advised that I need to be mindful that the matter of Intaga is still before the various courts of the Republic of South Africa, where some individuals and companies are currently being prosecuted by the state. I raise this matter only for the noting by this Commission. I now turn to deal with some of the key issues as I understand them. The Chairman, I wish to confirm that I received a letter from my colleague, Dr. Zwelini Lawrence Mkhize, who was the MEC of Finance and Economic Development in KwaZulu-Natal at the time. In his letter dated the 15th July 2005, Dr. Z.L. Mkhize proposed that we establish a joint interdepartmental team that would consider the purchase of the water purification plants that would be installed in the various district municipalities that were highly affected by the drought. Dr. Z.L. Mkhize further explained that these water purification plants were to be funded from the Poverty Alleviation Fund that was located at the Department of Finance in the province. My role here, Mr. Chairman, was to support the proposal by Dr. Z.L. Mkhize for the establishment of the committee headed by the joint HODs of the Provincial Treasury and Local Government. It was this committee that dealt with the procurement issues from the beginning to the end. With the establishment of the committee, the executive authorities had no further role to play in the procurement processes, save that we may have received a report of progress. The other very important matter, Mr. Chairman, is that we know from the indictment on the Intaga matter and from the affidavit of one Mr. Gaston Savoy that the payment of the 1,053,000 was paid into the trust account of Kuboni and Shezi attorneys on the 12th of March 2007. In his evidence before this commission, Mr. White presents TSW 19 and TSW 21 in the bundle of documents where he illustrates how the 1,053,000 was dispersed from the Kuboni and Shezi attorneys trust account. In the diagram shown in TSW 21, Mr. White details that 29 payments were made between the period of 19 February 2007 and 21 August 2007. Mr. White clearly illustrates that all of the 29 payments were for the benefit of Mr. Sipho Shabalala and Mrs. BNO Shabalala. And I place on record, Mr. Chairman, that none of the 29 payments that were made were either made directly to me or for my benefit and or for the benefit of the ANC. What is in dispute there, Mr. Chairman, is the illogical inference or link by the forensic auditor who showed us how the whole amount of the 1,056,204.98 cents was paid to 14 various companies. What is absurd is the seeming attempt to connect the 1 million that was donated in cash to the ANC via myself, my capacity as the provincial treasurer of the ANC then, by Mr. Sipho Shabalala, with the fund that Intara had paid into the Kobone and Sheze Trust account. Mr. Trevor White develops a red dotted arrow in which he is attempting to link the amount of the 1 million rand that was received by me for the ANC by drawing two small diagram boxes outside of the square in the center of TSW 21, where he shows how the funds were dispersed. Clearly here, Mr. Chairman, Mr. White needs to explain to this commission how many millions did Intara pay. We know from Mr. Gaston Savoy's affidavit that is before the Pietermaritzburg High Court that only 1 million was paid. So where does this other million rand that Mr. Trevor White shows come from? If Mr. White is saying that he is referring to the same funds that were paid by Intara, then my question is, how can it be, Mr. Chairman? We now know for a fact from Mr. White himself how the Intara money was used and for whose benefit. Where are the facts of Mr. White's conclusions and inferences coming from? Where are the facts of the logic and rationality? Mr. White should account for his unfounded claims that he makes in TSW 21. Just on this aspect alone, Mr. Chairman, I respectfully submit that this commission should grant me the opportunity to cross-examine Mr. Trevor White. The third issue, Mr. Chairman, is the fact that I received a cash donation of 1 million rand from Mr. Sipho Shabalala on or about the 11th of June 2008. I place on record, Mr. Chairman, that the said amount of 1 million rand was received by me in my capacity as the provincial treasurer of the ANC at that time. I further place on record the contents of my affidavit that I deposed to when I was first approached by the investigators on this matter. That affidavit is the same affidavit that my lawyer submitted to this commission and is now part of the commission's documents of record. I would also like to further place on record the letter from my lawyers dated the 2nd of February 2010. In the said letter, I record that I was the authorized person to receive the donation on behalf of the ANC. I further clarify that I authorized the utilization of the funds for various purposes related to the KwaZulu-Natal ANC Provincial Conference that was held between the 20th and the 22nd of June 2008. I maintain, Mr. Chairman, as I did back then at the time, that the decision to receive the donation was bona fide on my part, and as such, the donation was received as a legitimate contribution to fund the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal. I further respectfully submit, Mr. Chairman, that the donation that I received from Mr. Sipho Shabalala was in response to a call made to ANC members, supporters, sympathizers, and friends to contribute resources in order to fund ANC activities. My submission, Mr. Chairman, in this regard are as follows. A, it is common cause that the donation I received from Sipho Shabalala was not the funds that Intara had paid into the Kobone and Sheze Trust account, because Mr. Trevor White tells us in TSW 21 that those funds were used to pay 14 companies for the benefit of the Shabalalas. Two, it was neither a policy requirement of the ANC nor necessity that donors needed to reveal the sources of their donated funds at that time. I add, for the benefit of this commission, Mr. Chairman, that our legal situation is now different, as we all know. 3, the receipt of the 1 million rand was neither unlawful, irregular, or the commission of a crime. 4, as stated in B earlier, I have no knowledge of any other source of the 1 million rand except Mr. Sipho Shabalala. Let me repeat myself on that one, Mr. Chairman. As stated earlier, I have no knowledge of any other source of the 1 million rand except from Mr. Sipho Shabalala. I place before this commission for noting that the 1 million rand donation was paid almost 10 months after the funds shown in TWS 21 had been used in its entirety by the 21st August 2007. The Chairman, I now deal with the unfounded allegation that there was political interference in the withdrawal of charges against me. Those who make these ridiculous claims, Mr. Chairman, do so for malicious intents. I wish to submit as follows on this matter, Mr. Chairman. A, that there was never a need for me to be charged in the first place. B, I made no representation to have the charges against me withdrawn. C, I wish to bring to the attention of this commission some of the relevant documents. The first is the record filed by the Director of Public Prosecutions in case number 4962/2013, held in West Natal High Court in Pietermaritzburg, and attached as marked MM6. The record was filed in terms of the court order in this application. It provides the relevant documentation to the withdrawal of the charges against me and other accused, and includes an internal memorandum by Advocate Dunywa, which negates Colonel Duproy's inferences. It shows that the decision to withdraw was taken by a meeting of officials who met in March 2012 and deliberated over 2 days. The second document is a memorandum written by Advocate Moipane Noko, explaining various decisions made by her in various prosecutions. A copy of the document is attached marked MM7. The document has been widely circulated and is in the public domain. The withdrawal of the charges against me is set out in paragraph B on pages 13 to 16 of that document. Reference is made by therein to the memorandum by Advocate Dunywa, which is the same one referred to earlier and included in the record. I submit, Mr. Chairman, that both the NPA memorandum, in which they explain the process that led to the withdrawal of the charges, and Advocate Moipane Noko's memo to the then National Director of Public Prosecution, Mr. Ngasana, and Dr. Ramaide are self-explanatory. I would like, therefore, to question Colonel Duploy regarding the allegations he is making that the withdrawal of the charges against me was as a result of political interference. What was this interference? Where did it come from? Who interfered with the NPA process? It would be a big concern, Mr. Chairman, if I were to be denied the opportunity to cross-examine Colonel Duploy on the unfounded allegations that he has made in his affidavit to this commission. I posit, Mr. Chairman, that Colonel Duploy's assertions are unjustifiable and unreasonable. In conclusion, Mr. Chairman, I submit that this commission is about establishing facts, and it cannot become a platform for rumor mongering and baseless conjecture. Once the facts are established, the commission is expected to distill the truth from those facts. It is my respectful submission, Mr. Chairman, that in the course of establishing the truth from the facts, we should seriously guard against those who would waste the precious time and scarce resources of everybody, including this commission, by setting us on a journey of a wild goose chase. It will be remiss of me, Mr. Chairman, if I end this opening statement without indicating that for the last 12 years, I have endured character assassination and had my dignity impugned due to the unfounded allegations that were caused by my unlawful arrest in the entire matter. When you search my name in the internet, I am referred to as one of those who were arrested in the Amigos case. This has resulted in untold reputational damage that I have incurred when I have done nothing wrong against the state or anyone. The statements made by Mr. White before this commission on this very painful matter and his repetition of baseless accusations against me only serve to further impugn my character. That is why I feel strongly that he should explain himself on the inconsistencies of his evidence to this commission. And I hope that our country can, at the very least, uphold the fundamental principle of our Constitution that we are all equal before the law, and to uphold it not selectively. If we can live by the dictum of the proverb that says, what is good for the goose, it is good for the gander, our lived experiences should give practical meaning that we are truly equal before the law. I am hoping, Mr. Chairman, that this commission will ensure that I too deserve to get justice against those who have deliberately dragged me into a criminal matter that had nothing to do with me. At the very least, I would expect from this commission the confirmation that the charges have been legitimately withdrawn by the prosecution authority as the facts and the truth shows. On that note, Mr. Chairman, my opening statement ends, and thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Mabuyakhulu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I just want to mention that part of the purpose, or if not the main purpose, is of these proceedings today, is to see exactly where the differences are in your version and the version of Mr. White and Colonel
Deploy.
Yeah, but particularly Mr. White and yourself in relation to the donation, and so that if leave to cross-examine is granted, it's clear what the differences are in the two versions. So that's part of the reason, and it may well be that from what you have given as your evidence, you call it opening statement, one can see where you stand. But Mr. Hali can now put questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Mabuyakhulu, just to get some context to what we're dealing with before we actually get into the
Mr.
meeting.
Chairman, sorry.
Yes,
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Dixon, yes.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Can I just be of assistance? I don't have any questions to ask, but if I can be of assistance.
Yes,
Refer to certain documents, and if I could just give you the page numbers.
Yes.
Because they have different page numbers in RR7. TSW 19 is at page 038 of RR7.
038. Oh, yes.
038.
Yeah.
TSW 21 is 039. The record that was referred to as being filed in the Pietermaritzburg High Court case starts at 040, and the statement by Advocate Norco, which was referred to, starts at page 073. That's just so that we all have our bearings with regard to our 7.
That's helpful. The last one was 073, yeah, page 73.
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. Mr. Ali?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Mabuyakhulu, From your opening statement, I gather that you are confirming, and if I can take you to the two affidavits, you have deposed to an affidavit which appears in bundle RR7, that's LEA 27, Mr. Chair, but it appears at page RR7-MM005. It's in red at the top right-hand corner of the bundle that you have.
Okay, just to make sure we all understand, when we refer to the page numbers, we'll just call the number that comes after WM without starting with RR7MM, so that it will make things quicker. You said 05.
Page 005. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
005.
Mr. Mabuyakhulu.
I'm still looking for it, Mr. Chairman. 05. Yes, I found it, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, okay.
And if you look between the tram lines, you'll see that it refers to an affidavit of Michael Mabuyakhulu. You see that?
Yeah, yes, I think he said he has got it. That's 005, or you've got two numbers there, Mr.
So one is the sequence number, and that's an application, but it's the
Yeah.
uppermost number.
For the record, we must just say that when we refer to page numbers, it will be the digits
uppermost
that
number.
come after WM and the upper number and not the lower one.
Correct. Thank you, Mr.
Okay, all right. What you have there, Mr. Mabuyakhulu, is your affidavit, is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, okay, Mr. Halley.
And if you go with me to page 16 of that document.
Page 16, Mr. Chairman, yes.
That's your signature above the word deponent, is that correct?
Correct, Mr. Chairman.
And this was deposed to on the 10th of February of 2020, is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
And then more recently, you've deposed to a second affidavit. And if I can take you to that, it appears at page 32 of the same bundle.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
And it reads between the tram lines, supplementary affidavit of Michael Mabuyakhulu. Do you have the same document?
Yes, correct, Mr. Chairman.
And then if you would turn with me to page 37 of the same bundle. Above the word, or the words M. Mabuyakhulu, is a signature. Is that your signature?
Yes, correct, Mr. Chairman.
And this purports to be an affidavit that was deposed to by you on the 29th of April of 2021. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So these are the two affidavits that you have filed with this commission. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Now, if you turn back with me to one of the annexures to the first affidavit, you will see that there's an annexure MM3, which appears at page 23 of the same bundle. You have it?
23, yes.
And if you would turn with me to page 29 of the same bundle, that's one document.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
And this purports to be an affidavit, and above the word deponent on that last page is a signature. Is that your signature?
It's my signature, Mr. Chairman.
And this purports to be an affidavit that was deposed to on the 19th of October of 2010. Is that correct?
Yes, correct, Mr. Chairman.
Now, if you, and I'll get back to that shortly. If you wouldn't mind turning with me to bundle RR4.
Bundle RR4.
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
That's a different bundle.
That's a different bundle.
I don't have that one, Mr. Chairman.
He says he does not have that one.
Well, he ought to have it. It was certainly made, as I understand it, was certainly made available to him. That is part of, bundle RR4 is Mr. Trevor White's affidavit, together with all the annexures.
Let me look for it. Chairman, then.
It would be written on the spine, is that right?
It ought to be written on the spine.
So look at the spine of the files you have.
I have the Trevor White, Sean White's affidavit, but it's not that, it's RR7MM142 before me.
In the same bundle or in another bundle? In the same bundle that we were using earlier?
At same bundle I'm still using. It's RR7MM/142, which is the affidavit of Mr. Trevor Sean White.
Let's see. Yes, I see that. Is that the same, Mr. Halley? It is.
Perhaps we can, if we can just turn to the specific page that he's referring to, if you can just refer me to the page so that I can understand what he's referring to. I imagine that what Mr. Mabuyakhulu is referring to, Mr. Chair, is an annexure to the affidavit, to the Rule 33 notice.
But is it the same affidavit?
It's the same affidavit.
So we can use this one, or can we not?
Well,
Because if we can stay with the same bundle, it makes things easier.
as far as possible.
But if we have to go to another bundle, we can go if Mr. Mabuyakhulu and his council have got the other bundle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It seems to me that it would be necessary. I'm not sure if the representatives can actually hear what we're saying, but they should make the bundle available, because there's a number of documents related to this matter that are only to be found in that bundle and not part of this bundle that we're referring to as RR7.
Was it sent to them at the same time as the other one?
I understand that it was sent through to them, and that appears at page 134 of the bundle, of the
Yes.
present bundle.
Mr. Chairman, can I help?
Yeah.
We do have, we're in a different room to the witness, but if we're permitted just to take him RR4,
Yeah.
we can
can
take
give-
that to him, and then we're all on the same page.
Yes, okay, you may do so.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, so got it. Yes, he has it.
He has got it now. Okay,
Yes,
all right.
Mr. Chairman, I've now received it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay, all right.
Now, Mr. Mabuyakhulu, you referred to,
Just indicate what page in that bundle we should go to.
thank you, Mr. Chair. The specific document is to be found at page 1999.
1999.
So it would be, that is correct, Mr. Chair. So it would be, and for your purposes, Mr. Chair, if you can just turn to its bundle RR4, and then in brackets, lowercase d, that's D for Delta. So you would have 4 different bundles that are part of RR4.
You must just not confuse my registrar. Is my bundle not the same as theirs?
It ought to be identical, but
Yeah.
it's a bundle that's divided into 4 lever arch files. So it's the 4th of the 4 lever arch files.
Well,
which has-
each lever arch file should be a bundle or a continuation of a bundle, so it should have A, B, C, D or something.
Correct, this one is D
So
for
which
Delta.
one must she
D
give
for
me?
Delta, Mr. Chair.
Bundle 4D.
bundle RR4 and D for Delta.
Yeah. RR4D. What page?
At page 1999.
Okay.
Our last one goes up to.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, we just don't have that. We have RR4 TSW 1359 through to 1404.
And we've got one that 1865.
And we've got another one that was sent to us which goes to 1865.
Yeah.
But we don't go as far with Mr. Hully's.
Yes.
So to be specific, this is an annexure that was attached as annexure TSW, that's Trevor White's annexure. to his-
I think maybe what we should do is let me adjourn for about 10 minutes. You talk to
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Mabuyakhulu's legal team and compare what you have, whether it's the same as what they have and what both of you have, and whether what you both have is the same as what I have. So
Thank you,
that
Mr. Chair.
when I resume, we are sure everybody has got the same thing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I'm going to adjourn for that purpose for 10 minutes. We adjourn.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hully, can you hear me?
I can.
Halley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
My apologies, Mr. Chair. It seems that I was referring to a document that was not in the chronology that the witness had.
Yes.
So if I can refer to a different page, same document that I wanted to refer to, but to a different copy of that document in the same bundle. This one would appear at page 1841 of
Yes.
of RR4.
Yes. Okay. I've got it.
Thank you.
Have you got it, Mr. Mabuyakhulu?
Is, Mr. Chairman, if I understand well, it's RR4 TSW 1801.
That's correct.
Thank you, sir. Thank you,
Okay,
Mr.
all
Chairman.
right. Thank you.
I'm referring to 1841, Mr. Mabuyakhulu. I didn't catch that quite.
Yeah, he has got it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Now, you referred during your, what you referred to as an address or an opening statement, you referred to a letter from your attorneys, which you said was dated the 2nd of February of 2010. I imagine that you are referring to this document, is that correct? A
Let me
letter
check,
from
because I
Ungubani
want
Worlds
to show-
Incorporated.
I wanted to show that what I have, that letter, Mr. Chairman, it is referred to as 1841. That is the one you referred to. And if that is the document, that is the document that I'm referring to, that my attorney sent in 2010.
Okay, and it's a letter dated 2 February 2010, and it's from Ungubani Worlds Incorporated, and it's addressed to Advocate W. O'Brien, the Deputy Director of Public Prosecutions. Is that correct?
Yes, correct, Mr. Chairman.
Very well. And
Maybe Mr. Halley, just for the sake of completeness, let me indicate that Ms. Ngubane, and I assume that she is the one who is referred to in the name Ngubane Wills Incorporated, who appears to have been involved in the drafting of the affidavit of Mr. Mzila,
yes,
was asked to provide the commission with an affidavit setting out her role in regard to that affidavit. I'm not aware that she has submitted such an affidavit, but I don't know if you know, Mr. Halley.
I'm not aware of it off the top of my head. It might have been
Yes.
drawn to my attention on a previous occasion, but I can't
Yes.
confirm that on this occasion.
And Mr. Shabalala was also directed to deliver an affidavit in regard to, or giving his version in regard to the donation. He has responded through his attorneys and indicated that because he has been charged, he fears that he may prejudice his rights or incriminate himself if he gave the information that the commission was asking for. The commission, of course, respects the right or privilege against self-incrimination, but I thought I would indicate that he has responded. I'm not aware that Ms. Ngubane has responded herself. So I just thought,
Thank you.
let me mention that so that we are all aware of it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, all right. You may continue, Mr. Halley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to confirm then, sir, and I think you have already done so, but I want to confirm that this firm of attorneys, Ungubani Worlds Incorporated, is in fact, or was in fact at the time, your attorneys. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
And this letter purports to be a letter that has been addressed to Advocate O'Brien on behalf of the ANC and on your behalf. Is that an accurate reflection?
That's correct. That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'll revert to the letter in due course. What I want to understand, insofar as the differences between your testimony and that, insofar as the differences between your testimony and that of Mr. White is concerned, if I understand your testimony correctly, you saying that an amount of 1 million rand was paid to you in cash by Mr. Shabalala, but that amount that was paid to you, you question whether it could be the same amount of 1.053 million rand that was paid, or that is referred to by Mr. White in his affidavit as having been paid by Ntaka into the account of Koboni Shezi. Is that correct?
I think let me answer in this way, Mr. Chairman. My starting point is that Mr. White makes the allegations that there could be a connection between the 1 million rand donation that I received as the then provincial treasurer of the ANC on behalf of the ANC, as a 1 million rand donation in cash from Mr. Shabalala, whom I received, I dare to say, Mr. Chairman, now that the records are clear, 10 months after the so-called Ntaka funds had been dispersed or had been paid into the trust account, the attorney's trust account.
Now,
Yes, but I think the question is, whether it is a correct understanding of your standpoint vis-a-vis Mr. White, that you are saying there is no basis for him to link the amount, the donation that you received from Mr. Shabalala to the money that was paid by Ntaka Group to the attorneys Kubone and it's Kubone and who, Mr. Ali?
and Shezi attorneys.
And Shezi attorneys. So the question is whether that's a correct understanding of what your issue is. That's correct.
Absolutely, Chairman, I'm saying there is absolutely no basis or rationality or logic for the link of that amount of money.
Yes, and it is in respect of that issue that you wish to be granted leave to cross-examine Mr. White.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Okay, Mr. Harley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In other words, you saying to the extent that Mr. White connects the amount that was paid to you in cash with the amount that was paid into the trust account of Koboni and Shezi by Ntaka, you're saying to that extent you wish to cross-examine him because you don't see a connection between the two amounts.
Mr. Chairman.
Pardon me?
What I'm saying, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, is that we now know from Mr. Trevor White himself, who tells us in TSW 21 that an amount of 1,053,000 that was paid into the Koboni and Shezi attorney's trust account, that money was dispersed between the period of 19 February and 21 August 2007, and it was dispersed in its entirety. This is Mr. White's affidavit that says that, and also his annexure TSW 21. I'm saying, therefore, it is clear that Mr. White himself does not explain the rationality or the logic, how then he says the money that was paid through 29 payments to 14 different companies and was dispersed in its entirety, that the very same amount of money then find its way became the same amount of money that Mr. Shabalala may have paid to me in cash as a donation to the ANC.
Very well.
Yeah.
We'll get back to Mr. White's affidavit in a moment and to this very issue. But I just want to take you to something else before we get back to that issue. You'll recall that we referred to your affidavit that was deposed to by you in 2010. Can I take you back to that? And that is in the, for your purpose, Mr. Chair, bundle LEA 27. And for your purposes, Mr. Mabuyakhulu, it's the bundle RR7 at page 23.
Why do we get different references?
Because Mr. Mabuyakhulu doesn't know about the LEA 27. He doesn't have a physical bundle like this with a spine. So you've got a bundle with a spine, Mr. Chair. So when you look at the spine, you want to see bundle LEA 27.
Yes.
But he doesn't have a physical bundle. So that's why.
Yeah, but even though it might not be a physical bundle, it could have the same, it could be referred to as bundle.
I'll
whatever.
refer to it as bundle RR7 then.
Yeah, because if the contents are the same, there's no
contents
reason
are
why it should not bear the same reference. Because when you give me a different reference and you give him a different reference, it
It'll be
could be confusing. Yes.
Indeed, Mr. Chair. So it's bundle RR7, Mr. Chair,
Yes, okay.
and the specific page is 23.
I think what you may wish to do, if it's not going to cause any problem, is to tell Mr. Mabuyakhulu that his bundle that is written, whatever the reference is, from now on you will refer to it as the same as mine. So he can make a note, whatever, so that when you refer us to make a reference to any pages, it's the same reference for all of us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Mabuyakhulu, your bundle that is referred to as RR7,
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
in future, what I'll do is, because we've got a physical lever arch file, and our lever arch file has LEA 27 marked on it. So when I refer to LEA 27, just bear in mind that that is bundle
Just
RR7.
repeat AL.
LEA, that's Lima Echo Alpha.
AEL.
No, LEA, Lima Echo Alpha 27.
So it's like Leah, LEA 27.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Now, this is the affidavit that we referred to previously. It's an affidavit which is attached to your affidavit that you've deposed to in this, before this commission. And I've referred you to it earlier on. It's an affidavit dated 19 October 2010. What are the circumstances and why did you depose to this affidavit?
I'm sorry, you said we should go to what page on this bundle?
Pardon me, Mr. Chair, page 23.
23.
That is correct.
Okay. Okay, I'm there. Yes.
I proposed to that affidavit, Mr. Chairman, because there was a legal criminal investigation that was happening during the interim matter.
And but what was the purpose? Why were you called upon to testify or to depose to an affidavit at all?
I was approached by the state and the investigators who actually asked me to actually clarify what I had knowledge of at the time And then they asked me to depose an affidavit, and I duly complied.
And the reason why they were aware that you had knowledge that might be relevant was because of your letter, or rather because of your attorney's letter of the 2nd of February 2010, is that correct? In other words, the letter from
My
Mkhubane
attorney's letter was in response. No, Mr. Chairman, my attorney's letter was in response to the request from the investigators and the prosecution for them to actually know what was happening. So all of these issues were at the instance of the investigations and the prosecution.
So is the position that, as you understood it, in effect, the investigators wanted to hear your side of the story?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
And your understanding is that the investigators were investigating the question of the £1 million donation that had been made or allegedly been made to the ANC. Is that correct?
My understanding, Mr. Chairman, was that the investigators were investigating the allegedly money that had been paid, and they were actually trying to establish whether there was a link with the donation received by the ANC and the money paid into the trust account, where there was any link between the two.
Now, so when you say a link between the money that had been paid to the ANC, what money are we referring to now? Are we talking about the R1 million?
I think let's go back for the record, Mr. Chairman. I was hoping that council would have understood that there is an amount of about R1,053,000 that have been paid into the trust account of Kuboni and Shezi trust account by Indag. And then there is R1 million donation that was donated in cash that was received by me in my capacity as the ANC treasurer on and around the 11th of June 2008. And that the two, as I say earlier, and the chairman has asked me that question, and I've said, I'm actually saying there is no basis in linking the two as far as I'm concerned.
Okay. Now, I understand the point that you're making. You're making the point that the amount that had been paid into the account of Kuboni Shezi was paid in 2007, in March of 2007 to be precise. The amount that was given to you was paid to you in June of 2008, correct?
But he
That's
also
correct.
makes the point that in between, on Mr. White's own version, if I understand him correctly, the amount that came from Kubone and Shezi attorneys that was sent to Mr. Shabalala was used for various purposes.
Correct. He says it
by
was
Mr.
dispersed.
Shabalala.
He says it was dispersed.
Yes.
That is correct.
Yes. So I think that's part of
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
what he says here.
So the
And
point-
then therefore he says, what's the basis for saying that if that amount was dispersed by Shabalala, what's the basis for saying the amount that I received on behalf of the ANC came from Intaka? I'm interpreting your evidence correctly.
You're absolutely correct, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mabuyakhulu. So I understand the basis of the distinction between the two amounts from your perspective. What I'm trying to understand is when the police were making inquiry, or the Hawks were making inquiries about the link between these two amounts, who told the Hawks, or who told the police about the R1 million that had been paid to you in 2008? Where did they get that from?
I may not know any other witness that may have said that, but I know for a fact that when I was approached, I did honestly indicated that I did receive a donation of R1 million in cash on and around about the 11th of June 2008. And that is actually also confirmed in my affidavit.
Okay. So let's consider that question, but let's look at the letter of Ngubani Worlds Incorporated, which is now, if we can go back to RR4, Mr. Chair, at page 1841.
Yes,
That's
Mr. Chairman.
bundle RR4, D.
That is correct,
right?
Mr. Chair.
And page
1841.
1841. Okay, that's the letter from Ngubane and
Worlds.
Willis attorneys.
That is so, Mr. Chair. Now let's just read through this letter if we could. It says, we refer to our previous correspondence regarding the above and advise that we have consulted with a senior member of our client, the ANC, MEC Michael Mabuyakhulu, who at the material time was the provincial treasurer of the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal. Is it correct that they consulted with you, the attorneys?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
They then say, we are
That is
instructed to convey the following. Now, is it correct that you gave them instructions to convey anything? Before we
Yes,
get
they
into-
had instructions, Mr. Chairman, to actually act on our behalf.
Yes, I think you can take it, Mr. Hali, that if these were his attorneys, what they wrote here was with his instructions, unless he indicates otherwise.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now, you say over here, paragraph 1, that in his capacity as the provincial treasurer at the time, Mabuyakhulu authorized the receipt of the 1 million rand donation from the ANC member, Mr. Sipho Shabalala. Correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
And then in paragraph 2, they say that he wishes to place on record that such a donation was received in cash and was verified to be 1 million rand.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Paragraph 3, that that is Mabuyakhulu, further authorized the funds to be utilized for various purposes related to the KwaZulu-Natal ANC Provincial Conference that was held between the 20th and the 22nd of June of 2008.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
4, that the 1 million rand donation given by Mr. Sipho Shabalala was used as part of a package of donations received in the run-up to the ANC KwaZulu-Natal Provincial Conference to defray some of the costs of the provincial conference. Correct?
That's correct.
And then on the following page, at page 1842, paragraph 7, it said, although our client wishes to be helpful in this matter, however, we are instructed to place on record that Mr. Mabuyakhulu's resolute stance, and that of the ANC as well, that under no circumstances does the organization wish to compromise its donors and or its operations by disclosing information concerning same. Safe to say that the particular donation was included in the report to the conference in the Treasurer's report. Specifically, it was included in the globular amount of 7,227,707 rand listed as a donation in the income statement. Correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Now, we can accept, of course, that everything that is contained in this document or in this letter is based on instructions that were received from you.
I can confirm that to the extent of the question that Council has put to me, that I do confirm those.
Thanks. Now, it seems from what I'm reading over here, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems that the question of the 1 million rand being raised and the fact that you had received 1 million rand from Mr. Shabalala, that was something that was raised by your attorneys pursuant to instructions that you had given him for them. Well,
let me once again put it for record, Mr. Chairman, as I answered earlier, that was all in response to the investigations and the prosecution that wanted to ask us further on this aspect. So we therefore actually provided the information to clarify that matter.
Now, if I understand correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, and if this is your understanding as well, the police, or the Hawks in particular, were investigating a payment of 1.053 million rand. And they were investigating such a payment that was made in 2007. In response to that, and in relation to them raising that issue, an explanation was given that, in fact, you received from Mr. Shabalala an amount in cash of exactly 1 million rand. As it is said over here, it was verified to be 1 million rand. Do you understand that correctly?
I do, Mr. Chairman.
So what I'm saying to you is that they were investigating an amount that was paid over in 2007. You told them about an amount that was paid in 2008. They were investigating an amount of 1.053 million rand. You told them about an amount of 1 million rand.
I respectfully differ, Mr. Chairman. I think the facts don't tally.
Yes.
The facts are that when I was asked of whether I'd known anything, I actually only responded to the matter that I had knowledge of the donation. And therefore, the state itself, as we all know now, knew then, because they were actually doing their own investigation, how this other money was different from the other one. But the fact that I placed on record, I honestly did place on record that I had received R1 million, a donation that had been verified on behalf of the ANC, and it was a factual situation.
But my point is this. They were investigating the question of a payment of 1,053,000 rand. And they were investigating the payment of that amount in 2007. In response to that investigation, they were told that actually you did receive an amount of money. And you received an amount which was 1 million rand, not 1.053 million, but 1 million rand. And you did receive it from Mr. Shabalala, but you didn't receive it in 2007. You received it in 2008.
That is factual, Mr. Chairman, that I received the money in June 2008, on or about the 11th of June 2008, and that amount of money which I actually said to when I was asked whether there was any money that I've received. The question was there any money that you have ever received in your capacity as the provincial treasurer of the ANC? I stated the factual situation that I had received a 1 million rand in cash, which had been verified by ourselves. And that statement, Mr. Chairman, which has become common cause, that there isn't necessarily a link between the two.
So if I understand you correctly, they asked you, as you say, whether you had received any money in your capacity as the treasurer of the ANC at any stage. In other words, you were a treasurer between 1998 and 2008, and June of 2008. Are you saying that their query related to the length and breadth of your period as a treasurer?
No, their query was, had you ever received any money from Mr. Shabalala? And my response was, yes, I had received money from Mr. Shabalala, and I stated the period around which I were able to receive that money, which both my affidavits and the letters of my attorneys, all of them attest to the very factual situation.
Now, so the query was specifically in relation to Mr. Shabalala. So are you saying that the only time you received money from Mr. Shabalala was this particular occasion on the 11th of June of 2008. Is that your testimony?
I'm saying that at the time when I was asked, and the only time I can ever recollect, and I'm now talking out of memory, would be that period that I received money from Mr. Shabalala. That is the period that I remember. I don't remember any other.
Very well. Now, if I understand from your affidavits correctly, this amount that you received from Mr. Shabalala was paid over to you in cash, and you never issued a receipt in respect of that amount. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair.
And if I understand correctly, you didn't inquire from Mr. Shabalala as to who the donor was. Is that correct?
I did, Mr. Chairman, yes.
Did you understand Mr. Shabalala to be the donor, or was there an understanding that it was money that he was just passing on that was being donated by some third party that he might not have told you about?
I never asked Mr. Shabalala whether he was personally the donor or whether the money had raised from any other person.
But is the position that he approached you and said he had some money to donate to the ANC?
Yes, that is the position, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
And that position was following my call, which I had made to the members, supporters, the friends, sympathizers of the ANC to donate for the activities of funding of the activities of the ANC.
So when he told you that he had money to donate, did he at that stage mention how much money he had that he wanted to donate?
He didn't mention, Mr. Chairman. I only knew when I then received the money. At the time, he didn't mention.
Yes. And when he gave you the money, was that in your office? Was it in his office? Was it in your home or residence, or in his home, or what was the venue?
We met at the ANC office because
It
Mr.
was at
Shabalala
the
was an ANC
office.
member. So he
Yes.
came to the ANC office and we
Yes.
met in my provincial treasurer's office.
Yes, and he was carrying the money in cash.
And he brought the money to us in cash and then we received the money.
Yes. Do you recall how he was carrying it? Was it in a bag? Was it in his pockets? Was he, how, 1 million rand is not, how was he carrying it?
Definitely, Mr. Chairman, although I can't precisely recall the finer details because I'm talking about almost something that happened
10,
more than
12 years
14
ago.
years ago, but definitely it wasn't in the pockets. That definitely, but whether it was in a what bag, whatever, or I can't remember, but he was carrying it in some container.
Yes.
He had with him. So I honestly cannot recall whether it was a bag or a plastic, whatever.
Yes.
I would be representing myself in that regard.
Yes. So he gave it to you while you were at ANC offices.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Would you, as treasurer of the ANC at the time, have had an office that you used as treasurer of the ANC at the ANC offices?
I had.
You have
Mr.
your
Chairman,
own
because I was
office.
one of the officials. I was one of the
Yes.
top 5.
You were full-time, actually. Is that right? Oh, no,
I
you were
wasn't
not full-time.
But I was one of the top 5 officials of the ANC.
Yeah, in the
general
province.
office in the provincial offices of the ANC.
Yes.
Which is still even now, right now.
Yes. Okay, and what is the procedure for donations in the ANC. When you receive a donation, what is expected of you in terms of processing it and how, who may use it, who may not use it, what do you do with it?
Well, I'm not sure, I can't speak for now, Mr. Chairman, because I've been out of being treasurer of the ANC
Yes.
since June 2008. I can only speak
About that.
for that particular period when I was treasurer.
Yes, yeah.
Constitution of the ANC empowers that the treasurer should be the one who's doing fundraising. We should be able to see to it that the resources of the organizations are maintained. Of course, the one compounding factor in this particular instance, Mr. Chairman, was the fact that we were already left with 9 days before the provincial conference, which was due to take place on the 28th to the 22nd of June 2008. And hence, therefore, we already were swamped by the need for us to be able to actually pay for conference, the costs associated with the hosting of the conference. Hence, we took a decision, I took a decision then as provincial treasurer, that we would then actually be able to use the money in paying for some of the costs that were associated with the preparation of the provincial conference.
But what was, that's what you did, but what was the procedure,
I did-
official procedure? Was there not a procedure to the effect that if you receive a donation, for example, you must issue a receipt, you must have it banked, deposited in the ANC's account before it can be used? Was there not such a procedure?
Well, let me say, Mr. Chairman, at the time, I may be actually speaking out of recollection. I can't recall all of the exact details, but what I knew for myself that I needed to report, for instance, that I had received donation, and that those donations needed to be part of the report that goes to the structures of the movement of the ANC, so that I can confirm that money has been received, and if we have used the money, how have we used the money, so that we can be able to properly account, both to the executive committee of the ANC at the time, in particular the provincial executive committee.
So is your answer that you don't know or you can't remember what procedure, if any, was in place in the ANC as to what should be done when a member of the ANC or a leader of the ANC receives donations meant for the ANC? Is that what you are saying?
What I'm saying, I cannot recall the nitty-gritties of what procedures may have been there. However, I do say, Mr. Chairman, and I stated that there was an obligation for one to report to the structures once you have been able to receive money or donations. And this is what I actually duly did, that at the time after reporting, receiving this, even with the disbursements, we then duly reported.
Yes. Mr. Hale?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When you say that you had to report to the structures, precisely what do you mean? Who are the individuals who occupy those? Or what are the structures and who are the individuals that you have to report to?
We had to report to the Provincial Executive Committee, the PEC, but in this particular instance, because already the PEC term was at its tail end, we had actually then reported as part of the Treasurer's report to the provincial conference. Hence, in the letter from the attorneys, my lawyers, of the 2nd of October 2010, they clearly indicate that this was also reported as part of the globular money donation that had been raised, that total around about 7.2 million.
Of course, you would concede, would you not, that it would not be an acceptable way of doing things on behalf of any organization to say any member who receives donations meant for the organization may begin to use that donation before it is recorded in the books of the organization, even if he is using it for the organization. Would you not concede that that would not be, generally speaking, an acceptable way? Because otherwise, if you are going to do that, and Mr. Dlamini is going to do that, Mr. Msomi is going to do that, it's just going to be chaos. You know, everybody can receive money and they don't submit it to official processes of the organization in terms of receipts and to make sure there are records. Anything can happen. So it can't be an acceptable way, generally speaking. Would you accept that?
Chairman, I think there are two observations I would respectfully wish to make.
Yes.
The first, Chairman, is that at the time, I was the authorized person as the provincial treasurer of the ANC to be the one that should actually have the authority over the utilization of the resources of the organization. Of course, I'm not saying that it would have been a responsibility entirely for the individual, but for the office. Secondly, Chairman, with the benefit of hindsight, we can all make various conclusions of how we could have done this better or differently than this or that one. I think on that point, Mr. Chairman, it becomes a matter of saying, with the after effect, what differently could we have done differently at the time? But as I say, we did actually, even at that time, meet what one may say would have been the minimum requirements of ensuring that the report is able to be given to the structures of the organization. Of course, service to say, with the benefit of hindsight, you can come to any different conclusion that you could have done this differently or that way, Mr. Chairman. I think that is open, Mr. Chairman.
Well, part of this is just to determine whether you accept that whatever the position may be, it's not the way one would expect a big organization such as the ANC. It's not the way one would expect how it would deal with monies that it receives or even donations, and this is a big amount, you know. I don't know whether you might say, well, 1 million rand is not big in the ANC. So it's not a big amount, but it's a big amount. It's unlike somebody maybe who says, here is 50 rand, I'm donating to the ANC, and somebody says, go and buy XYZ. It's a big amount, and therefore one would expect that a responsible organization would have a procedure that says, if you receive donations on behalf of the organization, what you are required to do is put the money, get the money deposited into the account of the organization, so that there is a record, an official record that it was received, and then it can then be used after that. It was received and put into the bank account, and then it can be used after that. But at least there is an official receipt. You would accept that, I would imagine.
Well, yes, I do accept, Mr. Chairman, because as I say, we did receive a lot of donations.
Yes.
We would, of course, in some of deposited them so that we could ensure that we use them. In this particular case, Mr. Chairman, I only make one caveat, though, to say, because at that particular instance we were facing the pressures of expenditure that needed to be dispersed for the purposes of conference, which was 9 days away, we may then have responded to that pressure. But I think the procedure that the ANC had, a procedure, as I say, even if I can't recall, there was one, and I'm not saying there wasn't, and therefore, in that regard, Mr. Chairman, that there were processes that would actually ordinarily.
Yes. Well, I wanted to say, because when you talk about an organization such as the ANC, you're not talking about some spaza shop. There would be.
Chairman, on that point, and I'm not even saying, Mr. Chairman, $1 million is a small amount of money.
Yes.
As I say, Mr. Chairman, we may have acted with the pressures of the time because of, as I say, that we already had got expenditure that needed to be paid for the preparations of the pending conference that was due to take place on the 28th to the 22nd of June 2008.
But also when you talk about the pressures of the time, the other issue that arises is this is not like a situation where you are provincial treasurer of the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal and this donation is being given to you when you are in Limpopo for a weekend or something, and it's been given to you at the ANC offices. So why can't you get it received and deposited properly, even if there are pressures, because it's just the following day and it's cash, the following day or 2 days should be available for the ANC to use. So unlike if you receive it when you are far away and have to travel, but you are at the offices where whatever you may need to do is there and should be available. You understand that?
No, I do understand, Mr. Chairman, but as I say, that at the time, one's mind was based that, look, we needed just to be able to ensure that now that we need to respond to these expenditure pressures we have, let's be able to therefore use the money to be able to pay some of the things already that were outstanding, which actually needed to be paid for upfront. So, but the point we're raising, Mr. Chairman, I think with the benefit of hindsight, it is taken into cognizance. It's accepted.
Yes, Mr. Halley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now, if I recall correctly, you were the KwaZulu-Natal MEC for Local Government and Traditional Affairs, is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
And you were also the KwaZulu-Natal Provincial Treasurer for the ANC.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
And if I understand correctly, well, let me just understand this. What were your qualifications? Did you have any tertiary qualifications? Did you have any professional qualifications?
I do, Mr. Chairman.
Which is what?
I hold an honors degree in management. I also hold a postgraduate diploma in business management. And I have a number of certificates, which I don't think it is relevant for the purposes of today's proceedings.
Now, at the time that you were the MEC, and at the time that you were the provincial treasurer, did you hold these qualifications, the honors in management and the postgraduate diploma in management?
I did.
Yeah. So, I mean, you would obviously understand the importance, no doubt, of keeping proper records for financial purposes.
I think it's the point that this chair has conversed with me, and I've actually made an observation on that point, Mr. Chairman. Therefore, I respectfully say, Mr. Chairman, the point you have raised with me is the same point that I've accepted in your contribution, Chairman, with the benefit of hindsight.
Well, the only point I'm getting to, or the only point that I wish to make about this, is that it would strike me as not being an issue of hindsight. You had the qualifications at the time when you were doing these things.
No, but Mr. Chairman, the point I'm raising, without getting into an argument with council, Mr. Chairman, I've explained the position at the time. And with all due respect, Mr. Chairman, I don't think that I need to be able to belabor the point once more.
It's,
Well,
pardon me.
yes, okay.
My
Could-
apologies.
Yeah, no, that's fine, that's fine.
Thank you. If we could move on then. Insofar as the expenses are concerned, and if I understand correctly, your testimony is that you used the money from the 1 million rand for the purpose of paying for the expenses for the upcoming ANC conference, the provincial conference that was coming up. Is that correct?
That's precisely so, Mr. Chairman.
And where are the records in relation to those expenses?
They are in the ANC, Mr. Chairman, or the ANC would know the expenses. No treasurer ever takes, when you leave office, where you take the records of the organization away with you.
Now,
Would the position be that when you say they are in the ANC, would the position be that there would be distinct documentation that relates to payments that you made using that donation, or is the position that one will never be able to say these payments came from that donation, these other payments came from other donations? What would be the position?
I'm not in a position to be able to make those kinds of clear decisions, Mr. Chairman, as I appear now. Because as I say, what one did at the time was to be able to ensure that in one's report to the conference, where I didn't stand as provincial treasurer and I was not elected back into the executive committee, was to report. And therefore, having reported, then, of course, the organization would have then been able to deal with those matters going forward. But the details of those would not be within my purview as I speak right now.
And after you had received the donation at the offices of the ANC, after Mr. Shabala had handed over the cash, did you keep the cash with you until you gave it out to pay, or you gave somebody to pay, or was the cash kept with somebody else for some time before it was used to make payments?
As I recall, Mr. Chairman, again, I'm now speaking out of memory in terms of having to recall all those finer details. I would say, Mr. Chairman, as I recall it, the money at the time, I think one kept it in the ANC office, in the safe in the ANC office. But I cannot recall now the details of the actual expenditure, because I think I can't be able to recall that, but it was yes, it wouldn't have been me who would be sitting down and dealing with this and that and paying that, but it's a matter of memory on those ones, how it would have been done. But I would have actually made the resources available for the payment of those pressing expenditures at the time.
Would there have been a safe in the ANC where you would have put it after receiving it? Or when you say you would have put it in, placed it in the ANC?
As I recall, there was a safe, but it was, yes, it was not one of those built-in, some almost vault safe, but there was a safe that was there at the time in the office of the ANC.
And
because keep, not only that, it would keep petty cash and many other things. So
Yes.
there was, yeah.
Yes, and you would have had kept the key, or somebody else would have kept the key, safe key?
Yes, at the time, I would have actually been able to have access to the safe, and either myself or the bookkeeper, that would have been the person that I worked with. But I think I would have actually either had the access to the safe, as my memory as I recollect.
And do you have a recollection as to how long you might have kept it in the safe before starting to have it used to make payments, or authorizing somebody to take from it to make payments?
I honestly cannot remember, Mr. Chairman, except is to say, as I say, we were 9 days away from the provincial conference. And therefore, there was this pressure that we needed to actually be able to ensure that we start paying for some of the very outstanding preparatory expenditure that was required for the conference. So that would have been actually been done. So how long that would have happened, I really would not recall, Mr. Chairman. But I think, as I say, there was already an existing pressure to ensure that we actually start paying for the conference activity.
And you said you didn't issue a receipt to Mr. Shabalala when you got the money?
No, I didn't, Mr. Chairman. That one, I think I don't remember issuing. That's why even I went back after the 2010, I couldn't recall issuing any a receipt to Mr. Shabalala.
But did you say you accept, or did you say you are not sure whether the policies or procedures of the ANC required you to issue a receipt for a legitimate donation being made by somebody to the organization?
I said, Mr. Chairman, I do not remember all of the nuances regarding the policies of the time. Save to say there was a policy that amongst it that required one that you actually needed to be able to report to the structures of the organization if you have received any funds on behalf of the organization.
Of course, you, at this time, you said your term was coming to an end, your term of office as treasurer, is that right?
Correct, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, because the conference that you were busy preparing for was a conference where there was going to be an election of office bearers, is that right?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
And one would think that you would have, over the period of your term of office, you would have received many donations from people. Would that be correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Yes. And some of those would have been cash, or most of them, or all of them. Do you recall normally how people donated to the ANC? Was it normal to give cash, or was it not normal?
Well, it was back then, Mr. Chairman, the issue of receiving, making donations in cash was a normal feature, of course, although you would have others being able to then, make money into, donating money into the ANC fundraising account.
Yes.
But I think it was common that you would actually get people donating in cash back then.
Yes. And I guess cash, even in large amounts such as hundreds of thousands of rands, or even a million or more. So in other words, when you say it was common, in terms of amounts, sometimes it would be big amounts that were in cash, or what was the position? I just want to see
I
whether
will see.
1 million rand
I will
in
only
cash.
simply be
Sorry?
I will simply be speculating, Mr. Chairman, if I say I can recall for the whole period
Yes.
that I was treasurer, which appears as
Yes.
how much I would only be speculating. Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I would not. Yes.
But in terms of the issuing of receipts in regard to those other cash donations, where did you issue receipts in regard to others?
I may have to recall, Mr. Chairman, as I say that honestly, as I say, I can't recall whether in all others or in others there were any receipts that we issued. As I say, some would come in, and if they come into the office without me being there, of course, the officials that were there would have been able to receive the donation. But as I say, the requirement is that there would have been a procedure. I just can't recall of the details of the procedure of the time, but there would have been a procedure that would have been operational at that particular time.
Mr. Halley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And as the treasurer for the ANC, presumably one of your responsibilities would have included ensuring that...
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I'm just battling with the camera here. I'm not sure whether my attorney just can assist me before the question is asked. So I can have the camera.
You can't see us or what?
I can't see.
Oh,
Mr. Chairman.
okay. Well, maybe the technicians this side could assist.
If you would allow them to.
But if they can assist, that's fine. They may do so.
Oh, so I'm being advised that it may be probably on the other side, the commission side.
Oh,
Mr. Chairman.
yes. The technicians will, somebody's talking
Thank
to
you
the
very much.
technicians. You must just tell us when you are able to see us. But you
I will
can hear
do so.
us. You
I
can
do hear you, Mr. Chairman, very
Yes.
well.
Okay, maybe what we should do is, in the interest of time, is let's continue, even though you don't see us, as long as you hear us, because we can hear you too, and you will let us know when you can see us.
Of course, Mr. Chairman, I will do so.
Yes, okay, Mr. Halley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now, what I was suggesting, or rather inquiring about, is whether amongst your duties as the treasurer was a responsibility to ensure that the annual financial statements were prepared by the relevant auditors for the ANC.
It was, Mr. Chairman.
So over the years, that was, you came into office as the ANC treasurer, KwaZulu-Natal treasurer, that is. In 1998, you left office in 2008. So during that period of time, you would have been responsible for ensuring that all the annual financial statements were, or rather the responsibility for the preparation of the financial statements was handed over to the relevant auditors. Is that correct?
Yes, correct, Mr. Chairman.
And you would obviously appreciate, given your management, your background as with a postgraduate degree in management and an honors degree in management, you would appreciate, of course, that it would be vital for them to have a record of all documentation to be able to give a fair reflection of the financial statements, correct?
Just repeat the question again.
In order for the auditors to conduct a proper audit and to prepare annual financial statements and to properly or fairly reflect the affairs, and I'm talking specifically the financial affairs of the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal, they need proper records for that purpose. Correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
And if they don't have proper records, they can't
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
present their audit report fairly. Is that right?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Now, If I can once again refer you to,
Sorry, Mr. Halley, before you continue, Mr. Chairman, I now can see Mr.
You
Halley.
can see us, okay, all
Although
right. Thank
his
you.
picture is not
It's not
brightest
clear.
one.
Oh, okay. Maybe it's going to improve the technicians hear what we are saying.
Thank you.
Mr. Mabuyakhulu can see us, but the picture is not as clear as it should be. Okay, all right.
thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Of course, the other point, Mr. Mabuyakhulu, would be that if donations are not recorded, there are no official records of the donations in the organization, there might be difficulty in paying tax on those donations, isn't it?
Well, my understanding, I'm not sure, Mr. Chairman, I would ask to be advised on this element, that the ANC was registered as a non-tax-paying organization at the time.
Yes.
What the situation may have been done. So I think the issue of paying of taxation in this regard would not come to the equation. But I would still want to take counsel on that aspect.
Yeah. Mr. Halley, you want to take it from there?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you could turn with me to bundle RR4 at page 1849.
1849.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm M to RR4 1849.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Now, these are the financial statements, the ANC's annual financial statements for the year ending 31 March 2009.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
And if I understand correctly, or the auditors who are Manasseh and Associates, chartered accountants and auditors, they reflect the income of the ANC. If you turn with me to page 1853.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
For the year ending 31 March 2009 to be 7,277,706 rand. You see that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Now, if I understand correctly from the letter from Ungubani Walls Incorporated that we referred to earlier on in your testimony, the figure of 1 million rand would have been captured in this figure of income, is that correct? It was part of this globular amount. Is that right?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
And that was based on the instruction. Pardon me?
Chairman, though, let me put a caveat as well, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
At the time when these financial statements were made, I was no longer provincial treasurer, but I think the point raised, I take.
Okay.
Thanks. And when you give that caveat, I'm just trying to understand why you provide the caveat. Are you saying, is there anything about those figures that you disagree with? Obviously, you weren't responsible because you weren't responsible for the way in which it was prepared, because you were no longer the treasurer. But subject to that, is there some criticism, as it were, that you have of those financial statements?
No, I'm just placing for the record for the benefit of the Commission and the Chair that at the time when those financial statements were concluded, were finalized, I was no longer treasurer. I was no longer in the office of the position of provincial treasurer.
Now, I'd like us to go back, if we could, to bundle LEA 27.
Bangi?
Bundle LEA 27. And specifically to the affidavit that you deposed to in 2010. I'd like you to turn to page 28 of that bundle.
Yes, thank you, thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Now, you say there at paragraph 12.2,
I'm sorry, what is the page number?
pardon me, Mr. Chair, it's page 28,
Okay. I'm there.
and it's paragraph 12.2.
Yeah.
You say, I ceased to be the provincial treasurer of the ANC immediately after the election of the new provincial treasurer during June 2008 conference. I therefore was not responsible for the way that these were treated in the next financial statements, which was prepared sometime after March of the following year. For that reason, I cannot specifically say if the donation was included in the Treasury's report to the provincial government, to the provincial General Council, or in the globular amount of 7,227,707 rand, listed as a donation in the income statement. See that?
I do see that, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I'm trying to reconcile that with what was conveyed by your attorney on your instructions in paragraph 7 of the letter by Ungubani Worlds Incorporated. Would you turn
What I said, Mr. Chairman, as I said earlier, is that I gave the report to the conference on the donation. And the issue of how then in the actual financial statements would have been treated finally when the financial statements were put together would have happened when I was no longer in office. I think that is the context that is given there in 12.2.
Well, isn't the position that whatever the auditors would have looked at would have been money that had been receipted in the organization in terms of what they work with? They wouldn't have taken into account money that never officially came into the books of the organization and the accounts of the organization, isn't it?
I would not know how the auditors would have dealt with this particular case. However, in my mind, Mr. Chairman, the clear matter here is that there was an expenditure on the items of the item that needed to be paid for the organization that were paid for, and that those would have been part not only of the treasurer's report, that would have been part of the expenditure item that money would have spent on behalf of the organization.
So, well, after the money had been spent, would you have taken the trouble to make sure that all receipts that related to payments made from this money that you knew had not been officially receipted were preserved and were known to say these receipts relate to this donation that won't be reflected in the books of and the account of the organization? Would you have taken trouble to do that, or that would not have been done?
Well, Mr. Chairman, in this particular instance, as I correctly have actually indicated to the chair and the commission is that the details of capturing the expenditure, post-conference, would have happened after I had vacated office. So the question of those where they would have been treated, but as I say, I don't doubt that they would have been reported because a part of the court to say these expenditures were incurred, but I wouldn't be able to simply say I would have done 1, 2, and 3 when I was no longer in office. That is the
But I was talking about prior to the conference. I assume that the money was dispersed, as you put it, prior to the actual conference taking place. But maybe you mean that even during the conference. But if it was used, and since you knew that it had not been officially receipted, I can imagine that it would have been possible to say, you know what, because this money hasn't been receipted, at least we must make sure that the receipts that relate to payments that come from it are preserved and put aside. So, but I'm looking at before the conference started. Obviously, after the conference, you might know, you would not have been part of the PEC, I guess, or you would not have been part of the top 5 in the province. There would have been another treasurer. But I'm wondering whether you would not still be concerned to say, you know, there is this money that has been used, and maybe I should even tell the incoming treasurer about this money, and I must make sure that officials, well, by officials, I mean the staff in the ANC who deal with money, they put these receipts aside so that I can account properly for that amount.
There was an official handover process, Mr. Chairman, to the incoming provincial treasurer.
Yes.
And as I say, there was a process, in fact, of actually identifying those expenditure items, because they had been known these are expenditure items that were not directly paid from the bank account of the ANC at the time, that had been actually paid through those donations. Okay, and it's a point which I think I must speak on memory, that the bookkeeper in his affidavit makes a point that he actually does consider there were actually payments that were made. It was not necessarily done through the account of the ANC, but they were done through these donations. And I think that information, ordinarily, in terms of which expenditure items would have been the money incurred for, was, of course, actually known and available. It wasn't just a matter for the only thing for the information of provincial treasurer, but there was, of course, a handover process that identified all of the donations and other things that had been paid.
Yes, Mr. Halley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now, you've referred to an incoming official and you've referred to a bookkeeper. Is this one and the same person? Or are these two different people?
I'm referring to an incoming provincial treasurer as an official of the ANC.
Okay. Now, who was that person? Do you recall?
It was Madame Peking Konyeni, who became the provincial treasurer at the time.
And who was the bookkeeper that you were referring to, who gave an affidavit or a statement?
The bookkeeper was Mr. Delani Mzila.
Mr. Wu?
Is it Mr. Mzila?
Delani Mzila.
Oh, Delani Mzila, yeah, okay.
Okay. Now, can you turn with me, if you don't mind, to bundle RR4? That's the letter of Ngubani Wills. And I want you to turn to page 1842.
Ngubane Wills, yes, page 142.
1842. So it's the second page of the letter from Gubane Wheels Incorporated.
Correct.
That we referred to earlier.
Now, in that letter, you said at paragraph, or rather they said at paragraph 7 on instructions from you, although our client wishes to be helpful in this matter, however, we are instructed to place on record Mr. Mabuyakhulu's resolute stance and that of the ANC as well, that under no circumstances does the organization wish to compromise its donors and or its operations by disclosing information concerning same. Now, let me understand about this policy when you don't wish to compromise the donors. Is this the identity of the donors? Is it a secret not only from the public at large, but also from other ANC members as well?
So, Chairman, we must speak in terms of at the time we're speaking of. That is why earlier on in my opening statement, I made a point that at the time there was absolutely no requirement or no policy that required us to be able to reveal the donors, and donors would elect whether they wanted to be known or not known. It was the choice that donors had to do, and there was absolutely no legal requirement for donors to be made known to anybody other than if there was a need inside the ANC.
Yes, I'm just trying to understand what was the policy. Did the policy include keeping it a secret also from the rest of the ANC as well? That's my only question. I want to know how far that policy extended.
Is that if there was a need to know of information within the ANC, that information was made available to those who needed to have the legitimate reason to know.
Why was it necessary to make that point in paragraph 7 of that letter? That is now the point that Mr. Hali has asked you about. Why was it necessary to make that point in this letter? Because in this letter, that Mr. Shabalala was the one who had given you the 1 million rand was disclosed. So this letter says in paragraph 4 that the 1 million rand donation given by Mr. Shabalala was used as part of a package of donations received in the run-up to the ANC KZN Provincial Conference. So the question, and then in paragraph 7, the letter says, although our client wishes to be helpful in this matter, however, we are instructed to place on record Mr. Mabuyakhulu's resolute stance, and that of the ANC as well, that under no circumstances does the organization wish to compromise its donors and or its operations by disclosing information concerning the same.
Well, Mr. Chairman, you are speaking to a layman, and when you give instructions, you don't see it as a client, and therefore you construct it word for word. Such presumption, Mr. Chairman, would be taking matters to another level. However, let me deal with the spirit of the import of that as I understood it. That was just to place on record a matter of principle of how we believed at the time, that we needed to have an obligation to also protect the donors. As I've indicated earlier, Mr. Chairman, that there were instances where donors didn't want to be revealed, and there was absolutely no policy or legal requirement for that to happen. And I guess, therefore, what this letter actually attempted to do in paragraph 7 was to make that. And the reason why I say so, Mr. Chairman, is that it is not making specific reference to a matter where, as you say in paragraph 4, which had been said, but it was also just to state for the record in terms of principle. That's how I read it, it's how I understand it.
You see, when I read it, seems to me to give rise to an understanding that you and the ANC, when Ngubane and Wills Incorporated clients, did not want to disclose the identity of the donor. That's why the letter says both of you were resolute. I think that the word, that's the word used, if I'm not mistaken. Resolute, that under no circumstances will you disclose the identity or disclose or compromise the donors and operations. So one says, but if your understanding was that Mr. Shabalala was the one who was giving the donation, you had already disclosed him in the letter, there would be no need to put this paragraph. But if your understanding was that Mr. Shabalala was not the donor, he was just the conduit, then one would understand why you would emphasize that point. You understand the reasoning?
I understand it, Mr. Chairman, but I beg respectfully to differ.
No, by all means, but I just want you to, I want to give you a chance to deal with that understanding, to say, maybe you say, you understand it differently and these are the reasons, and you can say, here are the reasons why one should not understand it the way I'm understanding it.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Here is the reason. The preceding point, first of all, the first point is that we make under paragraph 4, as you have correctly mentioned, that who was the donor of the 1 million rand. Had we had an intention to conceal that, we would not be able to venture that upfront. So I therefore say, Mr. Chairman, that corollary of thinking that the chairman has is negated by the fact that under 4, we do state who the donor is. The second element, if you read it correctly under 7, and I respectfully say, Mr. Chairman, is the reading of a layman, is that it is couched in such generalities that it is not specifically talking about the donor. It is talking about donors or its operation, which is now couched in such generalities to actually just express a principled position. And that's how I actually say, Mr. Chairman, respectfully, my understanding at the time and my understanding now was simply to convey a principled position. But having accepted that in this particular case, we had already been able to disclose who the donor was.
Of course, I must hasten to say, you don't say expressly that Mr. Shabalala was the donor. What you do say is the donation was given by him. Of course, he could give the donation if it came from him, but also he could give the donation if he was simply a conduit. You would accept that, isn't it?
Well, I would accept it,
Yes.
that I'm thinking, Mr. Chairman. However, the truth that I've actually said,
Yes.
and which I want to stand by, Mr. Chairman, is the fact that I don't know of any other person other than Mr. Shabalala, and I never asked Mr. Shabalala whether the money had come directly from him or he had raised it from anybody else. So I received it. So that is the factual situation.
Of course, when you put it like that, it follows that then you can't say Mr. Shabalala was the donor. All you can say is he gave you the donation. But whether he was donating it himself or he was just a conduit, you can't say. Would you agree with that?
No, I agree with that, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
That's why we couch it in the saying that we couch, that we
Yes.
received the donation from Shabalala.
Yes,
And
yes,
we
Yes.
can't go beyond that and
Yes.
then conjure up something that is not based on any facts or logic.
yes. Mr. Halle?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Then, if we continue with that paragraph 7, you're going to say, or at least the attorney is going to say, that's safe to say that the particular donation was included in the report to the conference in the Treasurer's report. Specifically, it was included in the globular amount of 7,227,707 rand, listed as donation in the income statement. Now, we know from your affidavit that you gave in October of 2010, you said, I cannot specifically say if the donation was included in the Treasurer's report to the Provincial General Council or in the globular amount of 7,227,707 rand, listed as a donation in the income statement. So I'm trying to understand the conflict between the instructions that you've given to the attorneys and that the attorneys have conveyed to Ms. O'Brien and the statement that you've given in your affidavit. They're clearly two different statements. In fact, they're in direct conflict with each other.
Well, let me attempt to be able to clarify matters, Mr. Chairman, as I understand it. The first matter there is a report that was presented by myself to conference, which the report says that it was included in the report to the conference in the Treasurer's report. Now, which I gave that report to conference. And the second element is then dealing with how then the report would have been treated post-conference, meaning the PGC. The PGC is not provincial conference anymore. It is the Provincial General Council that would have taken later, either later in the year or in the following year. And therefore, that is where the matter, I think, would have been marked in the writing. But I think it's attempting to explain those two things. Firstly, that it would have been part of the report to conference, but then because you're then dealing with the report of the PGC or the financial statements that are processed after one has left office. I think that is the issue that even there that we may say that maybe there would have been clarified a little bit more by those who wrote the letter, but I think the point of departure is the attempt was to try and distinguish between the provincial conference, the PGC, and the treatment of the annual financial statements.
So you say that in the Treasurer's report to conference, to the provincial conference, this donation was included.
Yes, if I remember very well, Mr. Chairman, it would have been included as part of the sum of the other monies that had been raised, because it was not about raising one donation.
Yes.
So the letter would have said that it would have been part of those monies that were raised. That is where I'm simply saying whether then we can argue about whether the actual amount was 7.2 million at the time. I cannot recall all of that now. But I think there was therefore a report to conference that listed for me in that a donation there, then I'm saying it was part of the global amount of the donation that one had reported to conference. But reporting to conference is just part one. You then need to then treat it into the subsequent reports, which is the PGC, the reports to the PGC and the Provincial General Council and the annual financial statement. And I think the attempt is being made to try and clarify the distinction between those elements, with some of them occurred when I was no longer in office.
Yes. So in the treasurer's report, when you say you think it was included, you don't sound very definitive, and maybe one should understand that. But would the report have made it clear that you were talking about a particular donation of 1 million rand? Because I think if you just mentioned a globular amount, I'm not sure that the report can be said to have made it clear that you were reporting that you received this donation.
As a matter of practice, Mr. Chairman, for your benefit, in my 10 years as provincial treasurer,
Yeah.
I never went to conference and to item donations from individuals.
Sorry?
We never did that because the day that we never went to itemize in
Yeah.
the public records of the donations from individuals or from companies, because
Yes.
that report would have easily leaked, find its way to any other, and
Yeah.
that's why we used to treat it in the globular amounts,
Okay.
even if we on record. So we never then identify donor A, donor B, donor C, and therefore
Yes.
identify them. We never
Yes.
did that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so when you say it was included, is it correct that all that you are saying is the globular amount that conference was told about of donations, that were received, included it in the calculation? It was calculated, but there would have been nothing in the report that specifically indicates that there is this particular donation. It would just be part of donations received.
That is how, Mr. Chairman, we always treated donations.
Yeah.
And in my 10-year tenure, I
Yeah.
never actually ever put a report that itemized the donation.
Yes.
No, any of my predecessors had actually ever done
Yeah.
that.
Yes. Yes. So if you had received various donations from different sources, including this one, you would simply add them up and then say in the report, we received like 100 million rand donations. Which one came from whom and how it came, nobody would know that. Is that correct? In terms of
No,
the
Mr. Chairman,
report?
we wouldn't receive the 100 million, and I don't remember ever receiving 100 million.
Okay, let's say 10 million.
What we would do, Chairman, we would do exactly what the chair is saying, but we would then take a report and then we would share that report with the leadership in terms of the finance committee and the officials, because at that level, we were able to share information. And I must indicate, Mr. Chairman, that, excuse me, there was always sensitivity around the protection of your donors, because as I say, some used to expressly indicate that they wouldn't want to be made known public. There would be those donors that would make themselves available. In that instance, we would then be able to ensure that we therefore acknowledge them, and therefore we actually write letters of acknowledgement to them. But that would only happen to those donors that don't have a difficulty. But even in those instances, we wouldn't sit and then in a meeting with 3,000 or 4,000 people and there go and stand and say, I'm presenting the Treasurer's financial report, which itemizes all of the donors, because we never did that in Mr.
Okay, all right. Mr. Halley,
Thank you, Mr.
we're nearly 25 to 8. I think we should try and see whether we can finish by 8.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And of course, you need to deal with the put questions, such questions as you wish to put to Mr. Mabuyakhulu in regard to the issue he raises of the link between the donation given to him by Mr. Shabalala and the donation given to Kubone and Shezi Attorneys by Intaga Group.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll in fact conclude with that.
Oh, okay.
Now, so if I understand what you're saying correctly, in essence, and I'm not saying that this is necessarily what occurred as a fact, but the reality is the validity of the record, the Treasurer's report, is dependent entirely upon the integrity of the relevant treasurer. In truth, the treasurer could have received 20 or 30 million rand more, but nobody would know that from the ANC because it's simply not recorded in the books. Everything is given as a globular sum. Would that be a fair statement?
Necessarily with that proposition, Mr. Chairman.
I'm
The reason
sorry.
why I don't agree, because
I'm sorry.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, just start afresh giving your answer, Mr. Mabuyakhulu. You were speaking softly, I couldn't hear.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. I'm saying, Mr. Chairman, I don't necessarily agree with the proposition made, precisely because that proposition doesn't recognize the fact that I've said, Mr. Chairman, that there were structures that were legitimately being taken into confidence on the donation made by the organization. And therefore, even if you were not actually given to the whole of the structure sum of the membership, which mean many people, but you would have actually, of course, been able to take into confidence your colleagues that you serve with, particularly in the Provincial Executive Committee, and I'm meaning here in the officials as well as in the Finance Committee, that you would be able to then actually then brief them in that regard. So it's not necessarily that it would be simply, if I would put it, only on the goodwill of the treasurer. No, I don't necessarily agree with that assertion.
Well, if perhaps I've misunderstood them. My understanding is that when you take them into your conference, you would give them information of the globular figure of what was received, unless I misunderstood that. So you're telling them that an amount of, in this case, 7-point-odd million rand was received. And that includes all the donors. They're not itemized. Each donor is not itemized.
Yes, for the purposes of the report that would go to the conference, you wouldn't be able to actually itemize those donors. And we did not do it at the time.
I'm talking about the reports to the structures of which you speak. I'm talking about the report to the structures, the people that you take into your conference.
I'm saying, Mr. Chairman, you would of course have the people that you serve with in the officials, that you would actually be able to report to them that we are actually working on these matters or we are receiving these donors, because the treasurer, although he's a treasurer in terms of the constitution as to lead, but also is serving together with other officials. So the point I'm making there is the distinction between going to a meeting with a number of comrades or leaders where you could actually then report on the details, because those details would easily find their way outside of the ranks of the organization.
Yeah, no, I think Mr. Halley's question is whether when you tell officials, let us say the Provincial Executive Committee of which you would have been part, whether as treasurer, whether one, though they are some of the people that you would tell about, that you would tell about this kind about donations, number one, in confidence. Two, whether when you tell them, you would give details, or whether you'll simply still say, you know, we have received 7 million rand in terms of all the donations, or whether you'd give more details. That's what he's asking. When you speak to those that are your colleagues serving, for example, in the PEC, or the top 5.
Well,
or the top 5, maybe not the PEC.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
The top 5, yeah.
I'm with you there, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah,
Of course,
yeah.
you would share the information with the top 5,
Yeah,
but you would not necessarily share that information with a bigger, because when you prepare those statements, financial, you're going to prepare your report, for instance, you would then be able to then take your top 5 and around those officials that needs to report. They will then be able to indicate some of the things. And as I said earlier, they could then be questions that even others would ask. At that level, everyone, I think, would be impacted because of the level of, at the top 5, let me say it that way. They would be therefore entitled to ask questions if there were any asking questions of clarity. Then you would explain to them how are we dealing with these issues of donation.
Would you disclose the identity of the donors to the top 5? Or you would not
Ordinarily,
disclose it
I
even
must be
to them?
honest that unless there was a question, we wouldn't actually just go there. But if the top 5 wanted to ask who is constituting these donors, then you would do it, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Because you would actually be able to do it. But we work on the basis of being able to account to one another, but also to report to one another.
But that report to the top 5 would not be in writing, or would it? Or would it be in writing?
Normally, what would actually happen, because these are the officials meeting, you would actually be able to then say, when you are preparing your report that you are going to be tabling, then you therefore share that report with the officials. In that instance, and if there are questions, what normally would be, they would be actually sharing with them what I am going to report on, so that everybody then part of that the process of the officials would, if they ask questions, you then answer on the report. And you can give them more details, which ordinarily you wouldn't actually be able to give the details to the others.
So the report that you are talking about that you would share with them is the report that would go to, for example, conference or to a bigger structure. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes. So, but that report is the one that you said will not have details and will not indicate individual donations. Is that right?
That's right, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
The caveat though is that if then, for instance, who are the donors that have given us this money amongst the officials, then you can share that information as officials.
Yes. But that would be verbal. Is that correct? It would not be in writing?
It would almost be actually doing it on the basis of verbally, because you'll be taking it either into a confidence.
Okay, all right. Mr. Halley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now, if you could turn with me to page 18, sorry, this is bundle LEA 27 again.
Can I ask this question while you are moving to the other bundle? In the letter from Ngubane Wills, it says, that letter says that you handed the money, the donation to the ANC. Is that correct?
Just repeat it for my clarity, Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
That
that letter is at page 18421 of bundle RR4. And I
Yes.
think the particular part is in the second page of the letter. It's the second paragraph on page 1842. It says, the opposite seems true in this instance. On the one hand, we have an individual member who states that he handed over a donation of 1 million rand to the ANC, which he received from a donor. And on the other hand, we have an organization which, through various officials, confirms that it received the donation from the individual concerned.
Well, here is the lacuna here, Mr. Chairman. And that was the lacuna that occurred at the time, and I wasn't responsible for it. When this matter first arose, this legal firm acted both for the ANC, but also acted for Mr. Sipho Shabalala. Now, it was later when we became aware that that ordinarily, in our view, would have been a conflict of interest. And hence, you would see that we wouldn't have given any instruction to the extent that would actually be constructed in that particular manner. I'm just only clarifying for the commission.
So I guess is your answer to my question that it's not true that you handed the money over to the ANC?
I think what the writer might have meant here, they may have meant that Mr. Shabalala handed the money to the ANC.
Yes.
Because I have said on record that I received money.
Yes.
So I am not contradicting that version. Yes. So I wouldn't have said the state that he handed over.
Okay. Let me just see. Maybe I missed something. On the one hand, we have an individual member who states that he handed over a donation of 1 million rand to the ANC, which he received from a donor. Now, if the reference to individual member is a reference to Mr. Shabalala, as you seem to be suggesting, then it would mean that what they are saying is that Mr. Shabalala handed a donation of 1 million rand to the ANC, which was to you, okay?
I saw, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, which was to you. But then they say, which he received from a donor, that he can't be you. If this is to make sense, it would have to mean to be a reference to Mr. Shabalala. Okay?
With all respect, Mr. Chairman, I'm expected to answer on a letter written by lawyers here. I wouldn't know.
Yes, no, but I want to tell you what I understand this to mean so that you can comment. Now, I initially thought that they were talking about you having handed the money over to the ANC, and you made the point that probably they meant that Mr. Shabalala handed the money over to the ANC, meaning to you. That's what you said.
That is what my understanding of the
Yes. No, I accept.
I have no on this.
No, I accept that you are saying that's your understanding. But what I'm then saying is, on that understanding, the reference to he, when it says which he received from a donor, would have to be Mr. Shabalala. And in other words, they would be saying, Mr. Shabalala said he received the money from a donor and he handed that money over to the ANC. And of course, this may become important in terms of what we discussed earlier on. You remember that we talked about whether Mr. Shabalala was just a conduit or whether he was the actual donor. And you said, well, earlier on when we were discussing parts of this letter, you said, well, you disclosed Mr. Shabalala as the donor. But then I said, well, maybe it might not mean that. You know, he might not be the donor. And then we came to a point where you said you actually don't know whether Mr. Shabalala was actually the donor or whether he was just giving you money that had been given to him to pass on to the ANC. You remember that discussion?
I correctly remember, Mr. Chairman, and I still concur with your articulation that
Yeah.
as I sit here, because I've said to the Commission, I've never asked Mr. Shabalala whether he was himself the donor or whether he had raised the money from other people. I didn't ask that. So I don't, therefore, can't vouch for whether Mr. Shabalala was therefore the donor, but
Yeah.
I received donation from him. So for the purpose of this commission, we received donation from Mr. Shabalala.
Yes, yes. No, but you also understand, you might agree, you might not agree, you might not be able to comment. You also understand the approach that says, where the letter says which he received from a donor, that must refer to Mr. Shabalala if the earlier reference to an individual member is Mr. Shabalala. Or you say, hey, this is too complicated now.
I'm saying, Mr. Chairman, what is put to me is a version that I cannot be able to answer from
One way or another.
my knowledge. I have no knowledge of such,
Yeah,
and I would rather leave to those who may have
yeah.
the first knowledge about it. I don't have it.
No, that's fine. Mr. Halley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you would turn with me in bundle LEA 27 to paragraph 6 on page 24.
On page 24.
That is correct. Paragraph 6.
Yes, Mr. Chairman?
At paragraph 6, you say, I recall that Mr. Sipho Shabalala was one of those who undertook to raise funds on behalf of the ANC. Prior to the conference, he informed me that he had fundraised and wished to pay funds to the ANC. I do not recall the exact date that he informed me of this, but believe it was approximately 2 months or so before the provincial conference. Now, we know that the provincial conference was, in fact, from the 20th to the 22nd of June. So that would have meant that we're talking about approximately in April of 2008. Thereafter, I received payment from Mr. Shabalala in the amount of 1 million rand. To the best of my recollection, I received the funds from Mr. Shabalala on or about the 11th of June of 2008. The point over here is that as far back as April of 2008, on your understanding, Mr. Shabalala was already in possession of the 1 million rand in cash. Is that correct?
No, I'm not saying that, Mr. Chairman. I said, Mr. Chairman, there was an indication that Mr. Shabalala was going to raise the money. Part of those were going to actually assist us in the call of raising the money. Now, I only received the money and I didn't know how much Mr. Shabalala was going to give to me until I received the money on or about the 11th of June.
Okay, now I understand.
Well,
My point is a different one. My point is that you say in this paragraph 6 that prior to the conference, which we know was approximately 2 months prior, you say he indicated that he had fundraised, in other words, passed, and that he wished to pay the funds to the ANC. Now, it may be that he was talking about a different amount of money, but that was not your understanding. Your understanding was that the amount that he subsequently gave you on the 11th of June and the amount that he was referring to 2 months previously were the same amount. That was your understanding, correct?
Mr. Chairman, he never raised any amount. He actually had just infer, like when you are speaking and talking and say, we know, Treasurer, that you have made a call for us to be able to support the ANC. And therefore, I also would want to see what I can do to support the ANC. Now, I'm saying it is almost along those lines that he had indicated. But at that stage, he didn't say there was an amount of so much that was available. No, I only then knew how much Mr. Shabalala has raised when he presented to me.
Well, I think what Mr. Halley is suggesting to you is this, that based on paragraph 6 of your affidavit, you have to say, or you had to understand at the time, that this donation wasn't coming from Mr. Shabalala's own pockets. It was part of the funds he had raised for the ANC. Because in paragraph because I think you say in one of your affidavits that you had made a call, or the ANC had made a call to its members and its supporters to raise funds for it. And you say he said to you that he had undertaken to raise funds on behalf of the ANC. And you say prior to the conference, he informed me that he had fundraised and wished to pay funds to the ANC. I do not recall the exact date that he informed me of this, but believe it was approximately 2 months or so before the provincial conference. Thereafter, I received payment from Mr. Shabalala in the amount of 1 million rand. So I think Mr. Halley is suggesting to you that in the light of this, when you received that donation from him, you could not have thought that it was coming from his pocket. You had to think that it was part of the money that he had raised. What do you say to that? Mr. Halley, is that what you...
That is
Yes.
accurate, Mr. Chair.
Yes, okay. What do you say to that?
Yes, in the construction of paragraph 6, which of course I would have been guided and advised how it is being constructed. But here is the import of what I'm making to the commission. Is that Mr. Shabalala would have indicated or intimated to me prior that he was responding to the call that we were making to the ANC members. But at that stage, Mr. Chairman, he did not indicate that there was already money. As I recollect, it may have been not properly captured here, that as I recollect, he didn't indicate that there was money then available. And the only time I ever knew how much Mr. Shabalala was actually handing over is when he actually then gave the money to us.
Yes, but the point is, based on paragraph 6 of your affidavit, what you are saying is, one, you recall that Mr. Shabalala was one of those who had undertaken to raise funds on behalf of the ANC. That's the one point you make, okay?
Yes.
The second point you make is, prior to the conference, he informed you that he had fundraised. In other words, when he was telling you, he had already done the fundraising. And he said to you, he wished to pay the funds to the ANC. One, there was a call by the ANC or by yourself on behalf of the ANC to say, members of the ANC and those who support the ANC, please, the ANC needs funds. There's going to be a conference. Please donate and raise funds and so on. And you are saying, you recall that he was one of those who made the undertaking that I will raise funds on behalf of the ANC. And then you say,
Yes,
having made that undertaking prior to the conference, he then told you, I have actually fundraised for the ANC and I wish to pay funds to the ANC. That's what you say he said to you. And then you say, you don't recall the date when he informed you of this, but you believe it was approximately 2 months or so before the conference. And then you say, thereafter you received payment from Mr. Shabala in the amount of 1 million rand. So when one reads this paragraph, it seems that it can only mean that the 1 million rand was either part of the fundraising that he was talking about, or it was the whole amount that he had fundraised on behalf of the ANC. Would you accept that that's what it means?
let me accept that version, Mr. Chairman. Accept it on the basis that he did indicate, Mr. Shabalala, that he was going to, one of those who were going to respond to our call, and that he himself was going to ensure that there was a donation that is made available to the ANC. Now, along those lines, therefore, whether that donation came from him or came from another person, that is the only point, Chairman, that I wouldn't be able to know. But other than that, I think the version would be accepted.
But he would not say he had conducted fundraising if he was just donating, taking from his own pocket, isn't it?
I'm not
He
sure.
would be donating himself, his own money. He would not be fundraising from himself.
I'm not sure, Mr. Chairman, that one, honestly, the only person that can only speak with any distinctively is Mr. Shabalala himself. But for me, the important thing is that if he might have actually been able to fundraise from others, which is a version I accept, Mr. Chairman, I'm not saying that it is not a version. He may have raised it from, but the fact of the matter that I never asked him about the source of the funds.
Yes. But I think the proposition was simply to say, on this version, or on what you say he told you, and the sequence of events leading to the payment, to the handing over to you of the 1 million rand donation. It seems that he was giving you either the total amount of the funds he had raised on behalf of the ANC or part of it. I think that was the proposition in effect, and therefore that you.
I can live with that proposition. Say that I don't know if Barasi, the only person that can say so is Mr. Shabalala himself.
Yeah,
but I can live.
You can live with it. Yeah, Mr. Halley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We are 5 past. We must stop.
I think we can.
Past.
Yeah, I think we can wrap it up. My understanding.
But I think if you are able to, it may well be that some further questioning of Mr. White is necessary in terms of that diagram
Yes.
But if you are able to ask questions to Mr. Mabuyakhulu in relation to that diagram, I think that would be important, because for him, the issue of the link is quite important. And I think it's quite
Thank you, Mr.
something, yeah.
If I can tell you, I'll take you to the diagram in a moment, and I'll wrap up with the diagram. But to be able to explain what Mr. White is saying in the diagram, can I take you to page, to RR4 at page 1383? 1383, bundle RR4.
Is it RR4 118? Yeah?
1383. Mr. Chair, this is RR4, bundle C.
Repeat for me, Mr. Chairman.
Have you got it?
Page 1383, bundle RR4. It's a summary of findings. 1383, bundle RR4.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I'm trying to find it.
Have you got the right bundle?
I think I'm having it, Mr. Chairman.
I think this one we might not have used earlier.
We haven't used it.
Yeah, it's
This
a
is
new
the-
bundle that we didn't use earlier.
It's 183.
1383. What page can you find? I'll tell you whether you are in this right bundle. What page are you on at the moment?
I am, Mr. Chairman, on 1834.
No, I think you are in the wrong bundle, because this one doesn't have 18 something. This one, the first document on this bundle is Mr. Trevor White's affidavit. TSW 12. Mr. Halley, are you able to assist him with more particulars?
So the very first document in this particular bundle, which starts with RR.
1383, Mr. Chairman.
I couldn't catch that.
Maybe his legal representatives can help him to find it.
Going back, Mr. Chairman, I think we find it.
Have you found it?
1383.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, all right. Yes, continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Mabuyakhulu, look at paragraph 65. Have you got that?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
He says, based on the explanation provided by Mzila, and we haven't looked at that yet, so don't worry about that for present purposes, regarding the discussion he had with Mabuyakhulu a while after the provincial conference about the donations used to fund certain expenses. It is evident that the issue of the receipt of this donation of 1 million rand and the creation of an explanation for the non-accounting, therefore, was only started after inquiries in May 2008, and that Mabuyakhulu has played a significant role in assisting Shabalala with creating a scenario, no matter how improbable, based on the documents, to support Savoy's explanation that the donation was to the ANC. So what he's saying is that your version that you received 1 million rand from Mr. Shabalala, he's saying in the first instance, there's no evidence to support that you actually received 1 million rand in cash. But he says in the second instance that the reason why you have created that explanation is in order to assist Mr. Shabalala to explain that when he received the amounts from Mr. Savoy through Intaka, that he had in fact paid it back. So you were coming to his assistance. In a nutshell, what he is saying is that he does not accept that you actually received 1 million rand in cash from Mr. Shabalala. He's saying that's a fabricated story, that you did so in order to assist Mr. Shabalala.
Mr. Chairman, any witness that comes and must actually, whatever he says, Mr. White must then produce his own evidence. And therefore, in that evidence, why would I assist Mr. Shabalala and for what benefit and for what purpose? I flatly deny, Mr. Chairman, that I ever played any role in assisting anyone in this instance. All what I reported was the factual situation that I had received $1 million donation. And I never at any stage ever showed that I had knowledge about the source of the money or otherwise, which I don't. And in his own version, which I think it is Mr. White himself who can only explain this illogical reason of how then does he connect that 1 million rand, which I said I received from Shabalala, and what would I have benefited in this particular, if I was part of a scheme or an enterprise. I therefore deny, Mr. Chairman, that it is an illogical inference that is not borne by facts, that is not based on any rationality, but simply the figment of his imagination.
Well, he's not saying that there's a connection between the 1.053 million rand that was paid over by Ntaka to Shazi attorneys, and the amount of 1 million rand that was paid to you. He's saying there's no connection between those two amounts. He's saying the second amount doesn't exist. That you came up with that story in order to assist Mr. Shabalala. So he's agreeing with you that there's no connection, but where the two of you differ is on the basis of whether the 1 million rand exists at all.
There are two aspects of that matter, Mr. Chairman. I place on record, as I've done, that I did receive $1 million rand donation, and there was no reason I would have actually said I received a donation if I did not. For what purpose? For what intention? Now, he who makes this allegation ought to be the one that is actually cross-examined on the basis and the bona fide of this allegation. So I'm actually saying, Mr. Chairman, I did receive $1 million rand for the benefit of the ANC. And there's no reason I would have created a story that would have placed me into a matter that I am no player. I have no role in it. As I've said earlier in my opening statement, where I've been dragged into a criminal matter that had absolutely had nothing to do with me. And by so doing, my image has been impugned. My character, both politically and socially, have been assassinated. So there is absolutely no logical basis that I would have manufactured something like that if I didn't.
And if you go over to the following page, at page 1384, at paragraph 6, he's now been providing a summary of his findings. He says the following.
I'm sorry, Mr. Halley, where does Mr. White say there is no connection between?
No, that's my inference. I'm saying Mr. White is saying that this money doesn't exist.
Well, you put it as if it comes from him, or at least that's how I understood it, but
So,
you see, if,
so this is Mr. White's affidavit.
yes, but why do you, what makes you say that there is no connection, that he would
Well,
argue that there is no connection?
If I could just read paragraph 6 so you can see the two connected to each other, Mr. Chair.
Yeah,
He then says, this is now, as I've said, a summary of his findings. He concludes by saying, Mabuyakhulu alleged that he had received 1 million rand in cash from Shabalala on behalf of the ANC, in brackets he says, and not 1,053,000 rand. There is no other evidence that the said money was received by the ANC. And I have to date not been provided with a copy of a receipt issued by the ANC confirming receipt of 1 million rand. Mabuyakhulu has further not provided any explanation as to why it took 14 months from the date Koboni received 1,053,000 rand from the Intaka in 12 March 2007 until 11 June 2008, when Mabuyakhulu alleges he received 1 million rand from Shabalala. The latter only occurred after the inquiries were made within the ANC regarding the donation in May 2007, as it was the subject of an investigation by the DSO. So the way I read those passages, what he's saying is that the 1,053,000 rand, which was paid over in 2007, and this 1 million rand over a year, if it existed, there's not sufficient evidence to show that it existed at all. And that's why he's questioning, he says, there is no evidence that the said money was received by the ANC.
I understood Mr. White to say the opposite. I understood Mr. White in his evidence to say the opposite, and that's why the whole issue is where it is, that he accepted that Mr. Mabuyakhulu received the money, but his approach or understanding was from the Intaka group,
Yes,
this money was intended for
the
ANC ultimately. And therefore, it makes sense that it should be received by the treasurer of the ANC.
correct.
But whether then the treasurer of the ANC at the time hands the money over to the ANC or not is another issue. But I didn't understand him to dispute that the money, that Mr. Mabuyakhulu did receive money. As I understand it, Mr. White was linking the money that Mr. Mabuyakhulu received with the donation from Intaka Group. But that is where Mr. Mabuyakhulu raises the issue. He says, I don't deny that I received 1 million rand. I've always said I did receive it. What I'm saying is, at least what he's saying here is, what's the basis for linking that amount that I received on behalf of the ANC to the donation made by Intaka Group to Koboni Shares Attorneys?
Yes.
Yeah, that has always been my understanding. It may well be that what should happen, and maybe that's fine, because part of the purpose of today's proceedings was to really establish where the disputes of facts are in the two versions. That what should happen is that clarification can be obtained from Mr. White urgently, and either before that clarification is granted or as soon as possible thereafter, I can decide on Mr. Mabuyakhulu's application for leave to cross-examine Mr. White. And of course, what would happen is that at any stage, either before Mr. Mabuyakhulu cross-examines Mr. White, if I grant leave, or after, or before he cross-examines him, he could avail himself of further questions in the light of whatever clarification comes from Mr. White, before then he cross-examines Mr. White. Or maybe if the explanation or clarification given by Mr. White is such that Mr. Mabuyakhulu says, well, then I don't need to cross-examine him in the light of the clarification because I didn't understand his evidence to be what he is now saying, then we can take it from there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, if I could just, without elaborating, given the lateness of hour, what Mr. White is basing his conclusions on, or in part, is on the documents, the two documents which appear at page 1843 to 1848. Those are the two affidavits of what Mr. Mabuyakhulu refers to as the bookkeeper, Delani Mzila.
I'm sorry.
This is part of bundle RR4.
What pages?
1843.
Well, you have to, there is 4C.
This is
and
bundle RR4, pardon me, Mr. Chair.
4 only, without an alphabet. This one that I have in front of me is RR4C.
This is all part of D. RR4 and the bundle, the specific lever arch file is bundle D.
Yeah, each time you have got to say whether it's
Pardon
C
me,
or
Mr.
D, otherwise one gets confused. Just give me the page numbers again, 18.
So it's 1843.
1843.
And there's two affidavits, and they go up to page 1848. So there's two affidavits that are encapsulated in that.
Yeah.
And that is what Mr. White
Okay, let's talk about this one of Mr. Delani Mzila, which starts at 1843.
Correct.
Are you saying there is something that is said in this affidavit on which you base your understanding that Mr. White is saying that there is no connection between Intaga Group's donation and the money that Mr. Mabuyakhulu received?
So what he's saying is, if you read what Mr. White is saying, Mr. White is saying that the issue of the 1 million rand donation arose after, if you read through these two affidavits, the issue of the 1 million rand arose after May of 2008, when it came to the knowledge of Mr. Mabuyakhulu that the DSO, which was the Directorate for Special Operations, was investigating, the old Scorpions was investigating the issue. So he says that arose afterwards, if one has consideration or has regard to these affidavits. So he's saying that's when it arose.
Yes, but when it arose on the face, it could arise at a particular time and still have the connection.
No, sure. But what he's saying is, so if you go back to his affidavit, what he's saying is, as I read the affidavit, my understanding of the affidavit is that he's saying the connection, if there is a connection between those two amounts, then they're going to have to explain how it is that the amount that was paid over in 2007 to Mr. Shabalala, but only because, to Shezi attorneys, but was only handed over to the ANC in 2008. And what he's saying with reference to these affidavits is that it's clear that the amounts were only handed over in 2008. So that's
that's in terms of when Mr. Mabuyakhulu got the money that he got. I think there's no dispute about that.
correct.
Yeah. In terms of when the donation or money was paid to Kuboni and Shezi attorneys by Intaga Group, there is no dispute about that. So that gap is common cause. So, but what I was saying is, what is it factually that you use as a basis to say, to support your understanding that Mr. White says there is no connection between the money received by Mr. Mabuyakhulu and the money donated to the law firm? What is the factual basis for that understanding on your part?
So what he said in paragraph 7.1 on page 1846, he says the following. On the 20th to the 22nd of June 2008, ANC Provincial Conference was held in Pietermaritzburg, KwaZulu-Natal. A while after the conference, I was approached by former Provincial Treasurer, Mr. Michael Mabuyakhulu. He asked me whether I had noticed that certain items of the budget for the conference have not been paid by the ANC Provincial Treasurer's Office, and further informed me that these items had been paid for by donations money. So that's what he gets informed. He then goes on later on in paragraph, under paragraph 8, he says at paragraph C, I was informed by Mr. Mabuyakhulu. I have no personal knowledge and details of the donation used to pay for the items not paid for by the office of the KZN. This question can be directed to Mr. Mabuyakhulu, save for the last paragraph where I explained how the statement was commissioned on the 29th of August of 2009. So the point that I'm making is, and it's not the interpretation that or at least I don't understand, I understand Mr. White to be basing his interpretation on these two statements. And if one considers what he's saying, he's saying that these two amounts of money, the one that was paid over in 2007 and the amount which has been spoken of in 2008, he says that that amount doesn't exist because there's not sufficient evidence of it. But what he is saying also is that if that amount was designed to, sorry, if I could just refer to one further thing, if I might, Mr. Chair.
No, that's fine. No, I don't think you need to go further.
Actually, I think paragraph 2 on page 1843 is important. He says, in the course of my duties, I confirmed that a donation of 1 million rand was received by the African National Congress from a donor who I am advised was a certain Dr. Savoy. So that's...
None of the parts you have read to me seem to me to support the point you make. But I think the proper way is, let's get Mr. White to clarify this.
Yes.
As soon as possible, so that I will see in the meantime whether I can decide Mr. Mabuyakhulu's application even before that clarification is given. But if not, as soon as possible after Mr. White has clarified, I will decide it. Let's leave it on the basis that you understand it in a certain way, but the person who was doing the investigation, let him clarify.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You understand, Mr. Mabuyakhulu. Of course, what Mr. Hali is saying you would have no problem if that is what Mr. White is saying. I imagine, because your main point why you want to cross-examine him is,
Well,
I'm sorry, I'm saying your main
the
reason.
main point, Mr. Chairman, is precisely that. You see, if you go to TXT W21, which is Mr. Halley's illustration before this commission, he then indicates at the center of the square all of the payments. He then makes these very dotted red lines with the boxes outside. Now, my question, Mr. Chairman, you have the money we are being told by Mr. White himself how the money is being dispersed. Now, clearly, if I received the money, we now know from Mr. White himself that the money that I received was not the same amount of money. And at no stage would I have actually been able to defend anybody by manufacturing something that doesn't exist when there is no link between the two.
Yeah.
If he therefore, because it is true, he is linking it. It is not the other way around, as Mr. Halley is saying. He is actually linking. And because he links it, he is the one who must come to
Yes,
explain.
what page again is that, Mr. Mabuyakhulu? You mentioned the page just now. The page where you are looking at, where the diagram is.
It is
Well, maybe Mr. Halley might know the diagram.
439.
439.
Which is the only.
439.
It is 039.
Which bundle first? The one we are currently using?
Yeah.
LA 27, Mr. Chair.
Oh, okay.
And I'm saying, Mr. Chairman, if you go through there, you will see that Mr. White is making that link through the red dotted line, as well arrows, and as well as the boxes on top of that. The question, how do I come into that equation?
Yes, that is page 39 of bundle RR7. Or it starts at page 38, is that right? And then at
They're two
39.
different documents, Mr. Chair.
Sorry?
Those are two different documents. The one is
Yeah,
TSW 19 at page 38, and the one at page 39 is a different diagram, which is TSW 21.
Yes, but Mr. Mabuyakhulu is referring to page 39.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, W21 and page.
Yeah.
That is what I'm referring to.
You see, that is my understanding as well, Mr. Mabuyakhulu, that in that diagram, Mr. White connects the donation by Intaga Group to Kuboni Shares attorneys and says it goes to various entities connected with the Shabalalas, and then with that broken line says 1 million rand comes to you. Of course, he has got it to the broken line to the ANC as well. But I don't know if there is a key here. Some of the lines are solid. These two are broken. Does it give an indication, Mr. Halley, whether the broken one means?
My understanding, which is the one that I've just indicated, was that this broken line is a reference to the version that has been provided to support what Mr. Shabalala, how Mr. Shabalala. So he's not supported, he's not saying that this is the correct version. He's questioning that version.
Is questioning it.
That's my understanding, is that he's questioning that version. He's saying that he's given a broken line specifically because it's not part of his case.
Yes. Okay, no, let's leave it at that. Let's get him to clarify, and including what he says, what this means. And then, once he has provided that clarification, then Mr. Mabuyakhulu can be finished with the affidavit, Mr. White's affidavit, if he does it in an affidavit. It would be better if he does that in an affidavit, but such an affidavit can be obtained within a matter of days.
Yes, now I'll consult with him
Because
as
it's
soon as I...
just a brief point.
Yes.
Okay, let's leave it at that, Mr. Mabuyakhulu. Let's get clarification from Mr. White so that you are questioned on the basis of something that he has clarified, but also then I will apply my mind to your application in the meantime.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me take this opportunity and thank you for affording me an opportunity.
Yes,
I must say, Mr. Chairman, I've been waiting for a long time
yes,
because a lot of innuendos and allegations were made in a matter that I still strongly believe, Mr. Chairman, I had no criminal role to play or any wrongdoing whatsoever.
yes.
So I therefore welcome this opportunity, at least to be able to place
yes.
on record my own view that I believe, Mr. Chairman, I was brought into a criminal matter that had absolutely nothing to do with me from the beginning.
Yes, okay. Mr. Dixon?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes,
Mr. Dixon?
thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We'll take it as you have directed.
Yes, yes, okay, no, that's
Thank
fine.
you.
Thank you very much to everybody. Thank you to Mr. Mabuyakhulu and to Mr. Dixon. Thank you to you, Mr. Hali, and your team. And thank you to the staff and the technicians for making it possible for us to sit until this time.
Thank you.
And we will now adjourn. And I indicated during the day that tomorrow I will hear the evidence of Mr. Kevin Wakefield in relation to Busasa. We adjourn. Thank you.
Thank you.